it's my pleasure to introduce our first two speakers, Mr. Mike Asplund and Dr. Ryan Randa, who will be giving a joint presentation. Mr. Mike Asplund is the Executive Director of the SHSU Institute for Homeland Security. The overall goal of the Institute, both through its educational and research efforts, is to enhance the security and resilience of the transportation, energy, chemical, and healthcare sectors, and thus contribute to the security and resilience of Texans and the Texas economy. Prior to joining the SHSU staff, Mike served as lieutenant for the Santa Barbara Police Department, assistant police chief for the Monterey, California Police Department, and deputy director of education operations at the Common Operations Research Environment Lab. Mike also has experience working in academics and has served as an adjunct course developer or instructor at Sam Houston State University, Greenville University, Northern Arizona University, among others. Dr. Ryan Randa is an associate professor in the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology here at Sam Houston State University. He's the co-editor of the Journal of School Violence, the research director for the Institute for Homeland Security, and an active member of both the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences and the American Society of Criminology. His research interests include victimization, fear of crime, communities in crime, and behavioral adaptation. His recent work can be found in Justice Quarterly, Crime and Delinquency, Victims and Offenders, Journal of Criminal Justice, Journal of Interpersonal Violence, and Youth Violence and Juvenile Justice. Together, they have a lot of experience and knowledge to share with us, so we're delighted to have them both as panelists for this webinar. Before we get started, attendees, if you have any questions for either Mr. Mike Asplund or Dr. Randa, please feel free to enter them in the chat. The last 10 to 15 minutes of each presentation will be dedicated to a Q&A session. The chat box will be monitored by myself along with Dr. Bro, and we will do our best to get through all of the submitted questions. Additionally, near the end of our webinar, I'll be sharing the link to our post-webinar survey. We'd really appreciate if all attendees could fill out the post-webinar survey to have your attendance recorded, share any comments or feedback, and receive a certificate of participation. Now, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mr. Mike Asplund and Dr. Randa.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. Looking forward to sharing some thoughts and insights specific to parking lots as being hotspots for criminal activity. You've just kind of gotten our resumes read to you, as it were, from the websites, just to add a little bit more background for myself. And to give some, I know we had quite a few folks sign up for this, so I'll kind of vamp a little bit here, just to give a little, so you have a little bit more perspective. So the majority of my policing time was spent in Santa Barbara. It is a location that has a high number of tourists visiting a number of universities, so in a downtown area that is has multiple parking structures and parking lots. As part of my role as a patrol officer and then later as a street crimes officer, where we basically deployed during nightlife. We have a number of bars and nightclubs in the downtown area, not to mention parking structures, parking lots that were spread all over Santa Barbara. So dealing with criminal activity in parking lots was a part of the job that I did. I will share an anecdote as to kind of when I was asked to participate in this, I immediately go to stories or events that I had engaged in as a police officer in a parking lot. And one of them that stands out to me that's probably most significant is working bike patrol in a multi-story parking structure in the downtown area in a nightlight. It was nighttime, and working my way up to the top of a particular lot, ran into a male that was loitering. And in Santa Barbara, we have a municipal code that required you to actively walk to and from your vehicle when you're in the parking lot. And this gentleman was hanging around on the top. It was one of those moments where you realize you're watching the body language, And it's like, so this doesn't look right. Something's not right. And engage in a conversation with the individual, asking what he was doing. He was waiting for a friend, blah, blah, blah. But of course, this was on the 4th level of this parking lot. So I told him he needed to leave and he could wait outside of one of the entrance exits. And then I made my way back down to the bottom where I had 2 people I was working with, officers also on bikes. I told them what was going on at that point because I didn't feel comfortable about the vibe that in that brief engagement said, hey, we need to recontact this person and do a little deeper investigations, because we had him on the municipal code violation for loitering. Well, we took 2 different paths to go back up to the top, and my partners encountered this individual now on the 3rd level. And as I got to the top, because I then hear there's a foot pursuit in progress, and that took the guys to he made it outside of the parking lot, but they ultimately tackled him. He had a handgun, he had duct tape with him, and it turned out the guy had prior convictions for assault with intent to commit rape. So when you look back on your career, significant moments that I pretty much recognize that there's a woman out there today who was spared a sexual assault because I got a bad feeling about somebody and followed up on it. So that's one end of the spectrum. And then the other perspective for me was dealing with homelessness in the Santa Barbara area, and people panhandling or setting up to either camp or panhandle or drink or use drugs. So it's both sides of that spectrum. So that's part of what I'm bringing into this. Ryan, I want to invite you in. Was there any additional information in your bio that you wanted to share?
Early on in my graduate studies, I was more interested in policing policy and procedure as an avenue of pursuit. But for me particularly, I was more interested in that nexus of policing but crime reduction. And where I was, it happened to be more policing organization study as opposed to tactics and effective results. But around that time, early mid 2000s, something was becoming far way more popular, which was in environmental criminology and community criminology, and essentially the study of crime effects of places as opposed to motivations of people. I had been in the Army previously, and my take on motivations of people were that they were constant as opposed to malleable. That could be wrong, but that was my take at the time. So I was much more interested in drifting into the study of crime in place. And so over the course of the years that have passed, I've had several opportunities to participate and lead studies of crime in place. And I'll have a story for you later, but particularly pertaining parking lots, but there are many over the years. I don't have anything so good as Mike is where I definitely know I did anything to help anybody by applying theory, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Well, that is the key, right? There's a lot of people out in the course of and for all of those who are participating right now, you just don't know the impact that your service to your communities has on folks. And I can think about 5 or 6 people who would circle back and say, what you engaging me in my life made all the difference. But I know there's many others out there. So you can't ever underestimate the power of service within the criminal justice world to help people, or at least your actions result in positive impacts. So also moving on then, I currently am the executive director of the Institute for Homeland Security here at Sam Houston. I'm gonna transition over to the slide about our institute and just take a minute to let everyone know that if you have any interest in critical infrastructure protection, this is the place for you. And I will point out we do a number of things from research to training, and we have partnerships. Probably some of the most relevant one of the most relevant areas is our partnership for healthcare and emergency management. For those that have an interest in learning about the activities that we're engaging in with this group, I encourage you to go check out our website. I think that what's relevant here is we're moving to an area of understanding workplace violence and specific to the healthcare industry. So over the next 3 to 6 months, you'll start to see online courses for understanding for de-escalation and personal safety at all levels of in healthcare. So you're totally welcome to come look at all of this material. And then the other little shout out I'll give is that there's a link here to CJ in Texas, cjtexas.org. So if you are looking for any type of references material, we have accumulated lots of information. Specifically, we have a number of resources that are posted here for, actually this goes right to you guys, but the CVI has a directory here if you're looking for any type of resource. You can easily get to this. And so that's kind of what we've got. Now I am back to my slide deck here. Now, what I'd like to do, and my colleagues are welcome to jump in, is talk about this idea of criminal activity or crime hotspots in parking lots. And I want to start by framing the dialogue. So please post any questions that you might have in the chat, and I'm happy to engage in that. And to my fellow panelists, just interrupt me, please. Unmute and jump right in. So I want to talk about 5 areas, and in the midst of this, Ryan is going to jump in and present his material as a partnership with me here. So I want to frame this discussion, I want to do this in 5 ways. First, talk about some facts and statistics. Second, discuss, it's one thing to say we have criminal activities in parking lots, but really there's specific activities tied to parking lots, and we need it's almost subgroups within the broader conversation. I want to talk about why location matters, and then have a conversation about who's responsible for safety, who's responsible for people who are victims of criminal activity in parking lots, and then move into this idea of risk mitigation as crime prevention. So Ryan and I and the other panelists will probably jump in at some point. So let's start with this idea of facts and statistics. There's a great website, which is, I was not aware of the Crime Data Explorer. So if you want to dive into the Uniform Crime Reporting System and look at all kinds of information related to criminal activity, this is, as I was playing with it in preparation for speaking to all of you, I went to this website. So let's just start, as we talk about facts and stats, let's talk about some facts for a minute. We titled this Robberies, Collisions, and Mass Murders, Understanding Why Parking Lots Are Hotspots for Crime and Victimization. And I think it's important to recognize when you start discussing specific criminal activities, it needs to be, we need to begin that with a conversation of what's the impacts. So just using these 3 topics, when we start with robberies, I would say they occur with moderate frequency. I would probably add in there other property crimes like theft and things. I know that robberies are crimes against persons, as opposed to petty theft from an unlocked vehicle or felony burglary, auto burglary. But I would say they have a moderate frequency, and the impact that I view there is an economic impact. And I'll explain that a little bit in detail a little bit later. Talking about collisions, high frequency, happening all the time. But at the end of the day, it's not something that people are going to not go shopping or go to a place where they use a parking lot because of this idea of a traffic collision happening. But it is insurance companies that are impacted by these costs. And then finally, mass murders, which are low frequency. I probably should have said ultra low frequency here. And they have what I would call a national impact in terms of once those kinds of things happen, there's always calls for increased legislation. And you see and that lasts until the next mass murder occurs. So I think it's important to always frame this in this context. Now, Ryan, I'm going to call you out through this. Do you concur with this? Do you disagree with me? To your thoughts?
And no, not at all. When we talk about crime and offending, I often describe a pyramid type shape or a triangle type shape, where the most common occurrences are the formal building block at the bottom. Those are the most low impact but high frequency things, and then somewhere in the middle are, you know, moderate frequency, moderate impact, and then at the tippy top are the most violent crimes and the most rare things, which are going to impact the fewest people personally, but the largest audience via media. So a mass shooting may impact a small number of people personally relative to the United States. That doesn't diminish its impact overall, but a small number of people are going to be directly contacted, but the overall number that will experience it via media outlets is massive. So there is a inverse proportionate relationship between severity, rarity, and sort of ripple effect impacts in that people outside of the direct contact space are aware of it.
And I want to add something. You had talked about, you know, you're in the academic theory world, and I want to emphasize the importance of when we're dealing with crime reduction strategies or understanding, in this case, crime in parking lots. Theory absolutely has an impact here, because it's through theory that we are able to develop policies that are tied to crime reduction. And if all you're doing is being reactive to a criminal event without understanding, I'll just say, the intellectual foundations of why people commit crimes, what deters people from committing crimes, that's a difference between being an informed response versus a reactive response. So keep in mind, and as much as if you are here and you're a SAM student, you're like, oh, I got to go to theory, you should embrace that, because that's creating the ability for you to be a critical thinker in the space as you go into your professional world. Any other comments from our facilitator or our panelists on that particular topic?
I've said it a million times. The student who doesn't want to hear theory because they want to be in policing, wouldn't you love to know why people commit crime?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, well, this is really a shout out to the CVI people who put this together from different perspective, because the audience is going to see, we're going to see these things totally differently. You guys are seeing these big pictures, these big stats, and I jump in one by one at individual stories and look just at tiny little pieces of geography. So I think it'll be interesting to hear the different perspectives.
Thank you. All right, so let's look at some statistics. I pulled this is state of Texas. This is violent crime per 100,000. You can kind of see what the trend is for overall violent crime in the US versus Texas violent crime. And then I want to throw out the rates of larceny. This was the closest I could get to theft information. Same thing per 100,000. Oh, and then of course, what was cool is I pulled the location type. So I did not work out the numbers for parking lot or parking garage or lot location types for violent crimes. Really low when you look at the incidents, and the same thing is true for rates of larceny. Actually, I think it's the same stat, but it goes across the board. But here's the key point for me, is that violent crime victims, that's 440 out of 100,000. So a less than 1% chance of becoming the victim of a violent crime. And larceny is a little bit more. But again, you're looking at less than 2% chance of becoming the victim of a crime. So what does that mean when we go back to the topic here? That is that it's really about one thing, in my opinion, and that is feeling unsafe. That is the perception that drives the reality of safety, or the fact that if something bad happens, and this is a picture from San Francisco, pretty classic picture now, because of the changes, reducing what are considered criminal acts in California. I was there in law enforcement when these changes started to take effect. This is what people had to resort to with their vehicles, is basically leave your windows down, vehicle unlocked, to show that you didn't have anything of value in the cars, because it was the crime. Car burglaries were absolutely rampant. So again, going back to you, Ryan, did you want to jump in here, or should I move forward with the next section?
Well, I would say I was told the same thing at early 2000 Cincinnati. My car had been broken into, said leave the doors open, and you'll prevent yourself from having to fix a broken window.
All right, any questions from we've got about 20 or so folks here. If I'm more than happy to engage in a little bit of a dialogue. If you have a question, please let me know. I hate this to be me talking at you for the next half hour or so. And if not, we'll move forward. So facts and stats, right? We gave you some statistics. I know it's a high level wave top view of this. We talked about some realities of what are the impacts of those types of criminal activities, and really recognizing that if you don't feel safe, you're less likely to go out and engage in commerce, because at the end of the day, this is what we're trying to achieve here, is you basically go out and park so you can spend money in places or enjoy your life. And is that a perception issue, or is it based on a statistical analysis? But having said that, now let's move forward into this idea of connecting activities to crime type. So one size certainly does not fit all. And this is just my reflections of what I see. So the first one is there are a whole series of nuisance crimes. And if we're going to start, this is the key where I think we start, regardless of everything else, is where you're familiar with the, if you've been in CJ, you at some point will have heard about the broken windows theory. And now I'm going to maybe shoot myself in the foot and damage my credibility. That's Kelling, right, Ryan? Okay, good. I get an A for that. My pop quizzing myself here. But the fixing broken windows, if you're not familiar with this, was all about, if you want to improve or reduce crime rates, if you want to improve a neighborhood, the first thing you've got to do is go take out the blight. And I categorize nuisance crimes as taking out the blight. When in Santa Barbara, we had some poor areas, impoverished areas, and when we would go do what we call a neighborhood sweep, it wasn't to go sweep up those who were on probation or parole, it was to clean up the street. So tow the cars, get property owners to actually fix their broken windows, as it were, get signage put in, I was distracted because somebody was trying to get in, fix the street lights, improve the lighting, look at the traffic patterns, all of those things that are important to improve the area. And so here's when I start with this, it's always about nuisance. So what do you do? How do you work through this? It's done signage, law enforcement, enforcement, but are we turning a blind eye to this? Are we mistaking, for example, looking into homelessness for a minute, are we mistaking compassion for people who are hardcore homeless, that it doesn't matter what services you give to them, they're still going to be engaging in nuisance activities? This again is an area of focus for me. Is for about 2 years, that was my job as part of the tactical patrol force at Santa Barbara PD, is to manage the homeless population. And as I kind of went through that experience, I have determined on my own that there are different types, classes of homeless folks. There's the first group that I would call homeless by choice. So they have made a decision to not have a place to live. They don't impact services. They are responsible people in the community. And they're fine. They just kind of do their thing. And then you have homeless by circumstance. This is a broad category, and here's where I believe our services should be provided to folks. And those are the circumstances. Could be financial, they could be mental health, they could be drug abuse, drug use, or alcohol addiction issues. But the point is that group of homeless people, when you offer them services, they will accept those services and transition out of their condition of homelessness. And then you have a third group, which I call the hardcore homeless. These are the people that I would put into this category. It doesn't matter how often you provide services to them. It doesn't matter. They don't care. They're going to live a life that's disruptive to others around them. And unless you arrest them and put them in jail to move them on, really, you're just displacing these people. That's the only way to deal with it. But the problem is that when we talk about dealing with homelessness, we want to lump all of these people into one category, and it's not helpful. It's not going to reduce these. It's not going to make things better. The second area I want to talk about is specific to vehicles, and you have different issues tied depending on the vehicles: parking issues, collisions, DUIs, exhibition of speed. All tied to parking lots. I know that's that picture on the lower right with that vehicle up on that parking pole. The fact is I've seen that actually happen. How these cars manage to get themselves hung up is beyond me, but it does occur. And with regard to DUI, the picture that you see of the parking lot at Denny's there on the lower left is actually from Monterey, California. We had two state of California drug enforcement officers who were there for training in their state vehicles and were drinking. And as they left Denny's, they crashed their cars into each other. So how would you like? Yes, exactly, Ryan. That's the reaction I was hoping to see. We arrested them both for DUI. Can you imagine getting the phone call as a sergeant or a lieutenant of your state employees that were drunk driving in cars? Oh, by the way, loaded with guns and ammo in the trunk, of course. But again, these are criminal activities tied to, and I know parking, people say, parking's not a crime. Well, it's regulated, and there are, it is criminal activity. So are you enforcing? Again, it's getting into that, you could almost say it's a nuisance crime, depending on what side of the car you're standing on. But these are as another category of criminal activity we need to think about. Next is property crime, which is theft and vandalism. I don't know if that lower right picture of the vandalism to the vehicle is actually a criminal act, because if the person, this is citizens taking parking violations into their own hands. But again, this is one of those things that if you don't have security systems in place or people that are manning these locations, this is another category of criminal activity. And then finally, the one we are here to talk about is this idea of violent crimes and all types of activity that we talk about. It's interesting because when it comes to, I should have categorized these a little bit better. I would suggest that the top two are a perpetrator attacking a victim or a survivor. I would say that I would probably put robbery up in that category as well. I would say the aggravated assault is, in my experience, it takes two to tango. It's not generally random that they're getting into a fight. And the last one, the human trafficking angle here, is pretty significant. And I know we do a lot of discussion about why that's a topic, but I still think that right now in the criminal justice world, we are working to decriminalize things like loitering for the purpose of prostitution. We're decriminalizing other actions that are specific to the issue of human trafficking and prostitutions. I frankly think that's a poor approach, and this is why. And just to be very clear, my background, in addition to the work I've done in law enforcement, I also started a nonprofit in California called Set Free Monterey Bay. The nonprofit has an active home for women who have left sex trafficking as a restoration home. And I also have worked very closely with a number of California agencies on human trafficking issues. The problem about decriminalization is, and I wholly disagree with the assessment that this is targeted to any race or targeted to any specific group of people. The fact is that the entry point for getting out of being trafficked is typically an arrest for an officer to engage with that person and provide services. And so unfortunately, we have drifted to the extreme of the solution is to decriminalize and provide services, but how do you get those people into services in the first place? So, and that's a topic that we can dialogue with before, but again, this is understanding specific to parking lots. You have these different categories of criminal activity, and each one requires a different response. Ryan, I'm going to keep going here, or okay, keep rolling, or you jump? Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I think this is a great point for me to jump through my few slides. Assuming I can figure that out.
And while okay, cool.
Look at that. I did figure it out. So all of what Mike said has extreme value in understanding practical realities and practitioner realities about crimes in parking lots, your frequencies, your capacities, your public policies, and how they have a role in sort of like how we attend to those situations. But what I wanted to talk to you briefly about is sort of why do parking lots become hotspots of crime? Or what I said, what makes a parking lot a hotspot of crime? So theoretically speaking, we have to start with the idea of movement amongst populations. The idea of human ecology goes back to the late 1800s, but it was made popular in American sociology in 1950 by a sociologist named Amos Hawley. It is the science of where we go and how we go there. So I put there crime clusters. That's interesting because so do we. Like, people cluster. Unfortunately, it's not so easy as to say, like, well, population density or popular spots are necessarily 100% about crime, or it's 100% what happens. It's just a matter of figuring out, like, at the end of the day, crime is not necessarily evenly distributed across the city, as some of the early sociological theories might suggest. What they would suggest is that there's an even distribution of opportunity, there's even distributions of this, there's even distributions of that. And ultimately you get to a space where if you were to take in those early 1920s, 1930s theoretical takes on crime, you would say, well, crime must be evenly distributed, but that's just simply not a fact, and it hasn't been, ever. Any thoughts, comments, concerns? All right, we'll keep moving. So what we have is the later onset of something called environmental criminology. It is, in fact, unpacking the science of crime and place. Traditional criminology is about understanding criminological motivations, whether it's ranging from individual pathologies and why individuals may engage in criminal behavior or deviant behavior, or to sociological perspectives on why certain groups or social conditions are more permissive or facilitate criminal engagement. The pushes and pulls into crime is what we call it. Early on, some theories did acknowledge place, but only in the sense that they acknowledged what they called the slums in the 1920s as more criminogenic places. And they did so because of identifying sociological factors that applied to those places, which is a degree of transience, but not in the state that we would understand transience now, but transience in that, you know, different immigrant groups would move in and move out of those particular communities, creating language barriers, understanding barriers, a lack of stability. And for those of you basically familiar, we call that social disorganization. Now, that said, part of that extension process or the development of that process was to try to understand where hotspots would form. So if we're moving beyond the idea that a rough area of the city or a bad neighborhood was criminogenic because of the nature of the neighborhood, what we later found out in through partially through the technology of exploring where crime occurs and mapping and more pursuit of those tactics and those processes, we understand that hotspots emerge in that I think the basic fact is that it's an 80-20. About 80% of crime occurs in 20% of the locations across any given city. But within those 20% of locations, there's got to be some understanding of why those locations are indeed hotspots. Crime pattern theory exists to help us identify even smaller places as to why they are convergences that matter. We talk about things like nodes, which is the place like we all go, right? We all go to a particular grocery store. We have certain pathways. Some pathways are more predominant than others. We have our own awareness spaces, our own activity spaces. And what that might mean to you is, like, if you're a resident of Huntsville or Houston or wherever it is, you have your home where you live, and you have the grocery store you frequent the most and the places that you frequent the most. Those are your nodes. And the typical ways you get there, those are your pathways. And your activity space is all that space all together that you use and explore. And then your awareness space is the places sort of around that area that you're aware of, but you don't particularly pursue all that much. There's more to it than this, but we'll leave you with that as sort of basic flows. And like I said, going back to the late 1800s, human ecology describes the flow of people around their built environments. So what you're left with then is the idea, or well, I shouldn't say what you're left with, it's very reductionist, but what we're trending towards is the idea that certain places, certain nodes along particular pathways or in certain spaces can become crime generators or crime attractors. And the difference between the two is not really all that significant, but it is a difference. It's that in certain spaces, the opportunity for crime is so great that it attracts criminals. And other places generate crime because there's so much opportunity, crime is more likely to occur. So it's whether about the opportunity is known or whether or not the function of so many people in confluence creates opportunity. Now, that's a chicken and the egg situation. If we were to talk about Mike's perspective, Mike's mention of jugging, are parking lots surrounding ATMs crime attractors or are they crime generators? Well, for the longest time, jugging was not necessarily a thing. Now, has it become popular because of the media, or has it always been a thing and we just only learned about it? Or what necessarily is the case? But the fact of the matter is, Mike has an answer.
I think the answer is it's always happened. It seems to be the soup du jour for the current crime trend that is valuable. Just like, I'm not saying that catalytic converter theft, I don't know what those rates were previously, but there's opportunistic criminal activity, but this stuff that has been going on forever, some form of it.
No, it makes sense. So if we're talking about jugging, let's say it's been going on forever, then it's a known opportunity. It's a crime attractor. A parking lot with an ATM is a crime attractor. So that said, we have to think about, again, more about opportunity and sort of like the foundation of understanding opportunity. Opportunity contains three critical elements: offenders in the location, a suitable target, like, for example, somebody with a lot of money from an ATM, and the lack of guardianship. Guardianship can mean a lot of things, and it's not necessarily important to understand here because you learn that along your way. But guardianship could be anything from other people to known security devices to the presence of police officer. It can be anything. Guardianship is a lot, and there's more to these things as we kind of unpack them. But the convergence of these three things, if you look at the little picture here, it's a Venn diagram. That convergence of those three things doesn't necessarily equal crime. You'll see that if you Google it a lot, it'll say crime in that space. And that isn't really the fact. The fact of the matter is that creates opportunity. Now, where there's more opportunity, the theory goes there will be more crime, but it doesn't necessarily equate crime. And opportunity doesn't equate crime because that would eliminate human agency and choice, which is a critical part of understanding all of environmental criminology. And we get into, from there, some ideas on situational crime prevention. How do we take what we know and turn that into a mechanism for stopping and preventing crime, right? Public-private partnerships are something Mike brought up early on. It may not have sounded like it at the time, but the reality is most crime prevention has to be not just the police, because they are for a large part just reactive. They respond to calls. Now there's some proactive stuff that they do, and that's fine, but they can't be completely proactive. They have to be responding to citizen calls. That's their job. So how do you prevent crime from an overall perspective if you're not government agency, or if you're not, you have to take agency yourself? And that sounds a little bit like it could trend down a wrong road of blaming individuals. But the fact is you can reduce and mitigate risk. Like, Mike, yes.
Yeah, so you talked about, you just revisited this idea of a partnership with the public. And so as you were kind of describing this and hotspots, and I've got an anecdote to throw out specific to a parking lot. So again, going to Santa Barbara, there was a California State unemployment or employment office that was smack downtown in the middle of the city, a couple of blocks off of the main drag, State Street. And it became a gathering point for people looking for day labor. Now, the problem is that if I were to show you, for the next time we do this, I'll make sure I can case study this out. But you had a parking lot that was meant for the state office. So it was a public parking from the perspective of it was a government parking open to the public. And then you had people who would park their cars in that lot. They would loiter on a 1 block area. Vehicle on the other side of the street were residences and a business. There was a Head Start school that was on the another side of where that parking lot was located. And what happened was over time, this became, there were hundreds of people at times hanging out looking for jobs. And if you pulled up in a truck to go get a cup of coffee at the coffee shop, you got mobbed with people. In fact, they were fighting to jump in the back of the vehicle. But there was also no public facilities there that were available. So you had people hanging out for hours at a time. They were engaging in the nuisance crime that I described earlier. And amongst those groups was a significant percentage of folks who were here in the US illegally. The Border Patrol knew this, and so they would do regular sweeps where they would show up with trucks from all different places, which basically resulted in people running, jumping into homes, hiding in homes' backyards, hiding in places, and then of course the subsidiary drug dealers would start showing up, and it really became significantly problematic. Now, and so that is a great parking lot example, but how we solved it, at the time, I was no longer on the street crimes task force, but I was a community police officer, a beat coordinator. And so working with the local businesses in the area, working with the State Office of Employment, I were able, and then other places, we identified a location down by the homeless mission that was in a fully industrial area of Santa Barbara. And over the course of a month, relocated the whole labor line down to that specific area. But I didn't have funding available for signage, so I had a sign company that had a business right there. They donated the sign. The employment office let us string it up between 2 palm trees, and we spent both in English and Spanish with flyers. We had people over that week directing people down to the new location. And as a result, we were able to solve the crime because we displaced things back to a different location that had less impact, no longer on the school, no longer on the general downtown area, and things got back to normal, as it were. So just throwing that out, Brian, to add to, and I don't know if you, as I was going, I can't tell the story and think about how it applies to theory. So I'm going to let you make that connection for me, but I'll let you respond to that. Thank you.
Sure. Just from more of an academic standpoint, Lawrence Sherman, I suppose, wrote a book a long time ago, like The Styles of Policing. And sometimes moving crime to a place where it would have less impact is a strategy that works for the community. That said, situational crime prevention this is a running joke I tell in classes. If there's one thing I know about crime and crime prevention, it's that situational crime prevention works. Now, you might say, like, well, why don't we do that everywhere? Well, because it requires partnerships with the public, and it requires sometimes more resources than others, and it requires out of the box thinking about how to move things along and how to create a lesser impact, and understanding that necessarily an on-off switch is not the right answer, but sometimes it's a dimmer switch. Sometimes we want to turn things down rather than turning them off. I'll have some resources for you later on in the slide presentation about finding those case studies. But for now, I want to tell you a story. And this is in the mold of Mike's stories. I have something a little less good, but once upon a time in Colorado, I was a professor. And in that particular space, we were engaged by the police department in Greeley. And if you don't know anything about Greeley, which would be understandable, Greeley had a relatively significant gang problem. And then there were knock-on effects of that gang problem that were not limited to violence, but also included parking lot auto prowls, what the police department there called them. That was burglaries from parked cars, like smash and grabs, break a window, steal whatever you can, and move on. And that's how it was approached to me. Like, I was told, okay, this is a significant problem. We have a crime analyst. We're going to show you the heat maps, and they showed me the maps of the various parking lots throughout the city of Greeley, and one of them happened to be on university property. So they asked me to do a crime prevention study in that particular area and to recommend policy. Well, I was not super excited about recommending policy after I discovered that their crime problem was 6 break-ins. 6 break-ins a week, you say? 6 a day? 6 a month was the problem. Now that you might say, like, okay, well, that is problematic, but what if we do a study and the next month through random chance, 7 break-ins occur? You've got a study that fails by 17% increase in crime. There's such a small number that we were kind of at a little bit of a stalemate in terms of figuring out what to do. Then I started thinking about it, and I thought to myself, I have a team of student researchers. They were older than that, but student researchers, and we would go out and we monitored the cars in the parking lot for things that would be high value items. So we kind of creeped around the parking lot. We had badges, we had real serious badges, and we walked around, and we had name tags, and we had a police escort, and we looked in the cars and we scored the cars for susceptibility to break in. And then after a little while,
wait, you had badges?
We
Okay,
had name
sorry,
tags.
just trying to insert a little humor in this, but go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, we didn't need no stinking badges.
Yeah, thank you. That's where I was hoping you would get to.
Yeah. We had we created a trifold flyer in partnership with the police, in partnership with university police, and used their branding and provided information on all the windshields of the cars in the parking lot for about a month. And we went back a couple months later and we evaluated the average car susceptibility in the parking lot, and we found that our information campaign, it did in fact reduce susceptibility. Later on, the police department contacted me and said that their break-ins had gone down in our particular area, which I was relieved to hear. But at the same time, they had so few to begin with that I didn't want to be necessarily entangled with a process that produced by chance a higher break-in. For example, if in the month of January they had 1 break-in and in the following month, February, they had 2, it's 100% increases in break-ins. That would look bad for me. I was not interested in that. So I think at this stage, I'm going to pass it back to Mike, and then we'll circle back to my slides when we get back to mitigating and preventing. But does anybody have any questions right now? Comments, concerns, jabs?
Oh man, of course you stopped and I stepped out from it, right?
No, sorry about that.
Perfect.
Bad timing. So I'm going to pass it back to you because this is an appropriate spot to transition back.
All right. So the next section we want to talk about, and Mark, just giving you a heads up, I might turn to you here for some insight as we go through this, is talking about the fact that location matters. And similar to when we've talked about crime types, we've talked about certain activities, functions of parking lots. It's important that we recognize, okay. All right, we had a question. I thought we had a question, but it's Mary saying, hey, if you have questions, let us know. So talking about why location matters when it comes to addressing criminal activity in parking lots. And so you've got three types of, as I've kind of looked at this, public, private, and quasi-private, quasi-public. Public being what I described earlier, government or government-owned parking lot, as it were, for public use. You have private parking lots, which are specific to a building or apartment complex, and then quasi-public, which are privately owned but open to the public. And so, Mark, maybe you could provide. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but looking for your perspective on this specific to criminal activity and what type of lot it is. Yeah,
well, just like the professor was telling us, the place does matter. I mean, crime is opportunistic, and it can be dissuaded by making it harder, taking away the incentives. Things that people look at are how easy it is to escape, how easy it is not to be detected, and what you're going to gain from it. So I think all that stuff matters. And quite honestly, the people who control these properties, the landlords, flat out misbrand what's going on there. They want to whitewash the situation. They have a problem. They don't want anybody to know about it. So they tell everybody how beautiful and safe they are and completely hide the realities of what's really going on in their parking garage. I'm going to tell you about one when it's my turn, where the fanciest mall in town has 3 cars stolen a day, many days. 3 cars stolen a day. That's a lot. I mean, if you think about 3 different cars disappearing every single day that this happens, that's a big deal. You got to wonder why that parking garage is different than the Target down the street. Well, there is a difference, and there's a reason for it. And it's about the nature of things.
From your perspective, when you talk about the landlord, so for you, it doesn't make any difference who the landlord is, whether it's a government entity or privately owned with limited access or open to the public. Do you think that there's an obligation to disclose risk information? And if I'm getting into your stuff, just say, Mike, I'll address that later.
Yeah, well, from our side, there's a legal issue that kicks in. When I'm making money off of somebody that comes to my property, I have extra obligations to be upfront about what risks they're stepping into. Governments don't have that same obligation.
And we're getting maybe more technical than people want, but I think it's important for framing this. So for a apartment complex, for example, would that fall into that you're making money, therefore you need to disclose category?
Absolutely.
Universities, publicly, privately, universities, same principle?
Well, ethically, legally, anything that's touched on the government's got a wholly different set of rules to go with it.
Okay, and then the last, you're under cross-examination. No, it's not cross, it's direct, right? So the last one would be, I own a ranch and people are parking on to go to trespass. Is that a different standard? And I'm aware that people's cars are getting broken into when they park on my property.
Completely different standard. If I'm not making money off them, I have way less obligation to go out of my way to clue them in on what's going on.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just trying to better inform the material here. So, all right, let me move forward. So we've talked about connecting criminal activities to crime types. We talk about location. And now let's spend some time talking about who is responsible. And again, this is my perception, my perspective on this, but I've kind of drilled it down into 2 particular categories. One is safety and one is liability. So when it comes to safety, who's responsible? Well, I would argue that it is law enforcement, it is government entities committed to law enforcement. And then if you have If you're providing private security for a particular area, it's that responsibility. And then if there's a problem that's rises to the level of being criminal, you've got 911 to call to come take care of that. And then there's the liability issue. And again, I would say that, and this sort of makes Mark's point earlier, it's who is the landlord, who is the tenant. If it comes to publicly open, if it comes to publicly owned facilities, then you're going to be dealing with some level of an Office of Risk Management. If you're dealing with privately owned facilities, parking facilities, it ultimately goes back to the insurance company. And I don't know if the other speakers will get to this, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the economic cost, it's going to ultimately fall to an insurance company to cover those liabilities. Now I want to talk about something that may be a little, I talked to Mary about this as when I was preparing my comments, and this particular part of the conversation might not set well with some folks, because there is a level of responsibility for safety and liability to the person who is utilizing that parking space, a parking lot, whether or not you become the victim of a criminal act. And you can look around at different things. I pulled this up from the University of Chicago, and actually there's 6 different things here about staying safe in the city, and 3 here talking about being alert, planning ahead, and trusting your instincts. But at what point does the person who is utilizing the space become responsible for their safety or the liability of their safety? I would suggest that every holiday season, from Thanksgiving to Christmas, you see multiple public safety announcements from law enforcement agencies not to leave things visible in your vehicle, or make sure your vehicle is locked. And this may not be a popular opinion, but when I was a police officer, I always felt like if you left your vehicle unlocked and things were stolen out of the vehicle, there should be a charge for a police report to document that, especially if it's for insurance purposes. Because I can't tell you how many times I would respond, yeah, my insurance company said I needed a report. Now we've seen a shift in this in terms of police departments do now with online reporting. You're not taking the time of a police officer, but I'm just throwing that out. And then I don't know, Ryan, if you have any comments on that or any of the other panelists.
Well, I'll chime in here that this is whenever talking about crime prevention, it's a delicate area, because no victim of crime is ever responsible for their victimization. It's the criminal. However, there's a degree of risk mitigation that you can go through that makes your safety more and less reliable as you kind of proceed through the world. So it's never the victim's fault. It's always the fault of the criminal. But you can do more to make yourself less interesting to a criminal.
So I'm going to challenge that perception that what did you say? It's never the victim's fault. I'm going to suggest that for a fight in a parking lot where it starts with a drunk guy mouthing off and then he gets battered, that we could get into more nuanced conversations about that. That I think there are times when the victims take responsibility for becoming a victim themselves. He's got
okay,
that.
well, in the case of provocation, and I'm sure you could find some other examples where a plot goes bad or something along those lines. But let's just say for the majority of cases where the victim may have been ignorant of the possibilities that they could be a criminal, or they could be involved, or they could have been victimized by whatever. I think they have an expectation of safety in their community. Just like as you proceed into court, you have a reasonable expectation that you're innocent until proven guilty. You have a reasonable expectation that you are safe in your community up until the point where you're proven otherwise wrong. And I think to use your own data against you, the fact that you are only 1.6% chance of being a victim of a larceny and less than 1% chance of being a victim of a violent crime supports the notion that you have a reasonable expectation of safety.
Yeah, we can have, this is a great conversation that if we were all present together and we could dialogue and get everyone's perspective, I'd be interested in doing that. And we are talking about less than 2%. But again, this is one of the challenging conversations to have about who is responsible. Is it the perpetrator? Is it the property owner? Is it the landlord? Is it the person who is the victim of the crime? But that is a challenging conversation. Now, I'm going to use an anecdote that's not related to criminal activity to kind of make my point. My second part of my law enforcement career was at the Monterey Police Department as the assistant police chief. And one of my responsibilities was to work on a project to bring the next generation of radio systems into Monterey County. So beginning back in 2010, I know it's going to be before that. So about 2006, 2007, we saw new technologies for public safety radio systems coming out, and we had to replace our entire system. Now, the fact is that the price tag was anywhere between 13 million and $40 million for replacing all of the infrastructure and buying new radios for all police, fire, emergency managers. And as we had those conversations, the perspective I kept coming back to was simply this, that at the end of the day, there is still risk no matter how good the radio system is. A first responder still must go through the door. And so when we talk about, to your point, Ryan, that there's an expectation that you're not going to be the victim or the target of a criminal act, we do have to recognize that we've got to go in. We've got to go get our car. We got to park our car. We got to walk to and from the vehicle. So recognize it's almost that awareness perspective on being aware of your safety and your surroundings, which really can, and again, sadly, well, not sadly, but the good or bad, less than 2% chance. So we're mitigating against that 2% chance that we could potentially be the victim of a crime or the subject, the target. Any comments, questions from anyone? From the board, from the panel? Mary, we've been going for an hour. This could be a good spot to stop if you'd like, or do you want me to, do you have any comments at this point? Or Crystal?
Mike, y'all are still good if you want to continue. You have the floor for another 30 minutes or so, and then we were going to go into our Q&A session.
Then I get cut off. Just mute me.
If that's okay with you.
Yeah, so we'll go into the last part of my presentation, and that is specific to risk mitigation as crime prevention. So in my current role as the executive director of the Institute for Homeland Security, we talk about resilience of protecting critical infrastructure, and whether that would be how we get power to our house, the roads, because transportation are one of our areas of critical infrastructure protection. We look at things from the idea of risk mitigation, and I think the same thing applies. To what we're doing here. Now I'm going to play a clip from the movie Moonstruck, one of my, I think a really good comedy deal. And so here we go. And to set it up, this is Mr. Castorini, who has a plumbing company, and he is going to give some advice on replumbing a house. So here we go. And this kind of adds to my prior comment about the public safety radio system, but here we go.
Well, Mr. Castorini, what do you think? $10,800.
That seems like a lot.
Look, there are three kinds of pipe. There's the kind of pipe you have, which is garbage, and you can see where that's going. Then there's rotten, which is very good, unless something goes wrong. And something always goes wrong. And then there's cotton, which is the only pipe I use. costs money. It costs money because it saves. We should follow Mr. Castorini's advice, Art.
Okay, so with that said, that's my lead into this next idea of risk mitigation as crime prevention, is that you're going to have to spend funds to create a safe environment. And granted that the money that we are investing in security or personnel or lighting, you name it, is defending against a less than 2% chance of something bad happening. But we're going way back to where I first started this conversation. It was, what are the events and how much impact can it have on the environment or the community? The fact is that at the end of the day, this boils down to a dollar sign. This is a hard conversation because people don't want to talk about this in terms of cost. And I think that the challenge here is, yes, people are involved and people's lives are impacted and things are changed, but we need to start with understanding, this is of course my opinion, about if we're going to mitigate it, we have to expend resources, we have to spend money. And so these are a number of different things that, and even if it's at the government level, it's taxpayers' dollars to create and establish programs, it's business owners who are engaging in crime prevention through environmental design, and it's spending time writing policies and procedures that enable or work towards keeping criminal activity down in particular parking lots. So I'll just throw out some examples here. The first is with the city of Santa Barbara, we're seeing this all over the place. This is safe parking programs. Basically, they have all of these city lots, and if you register as a someone living in their RV, you can have access to public parking lots between the hours of, I think it's 10 and 6 or some space like that. There are specific requirements. It was interesting because I was there at the beginning of this in my time, so I'm glad to see it's still rolling. But it did require participants to actively engage in getting off the street. So this is a perfect example of someone who is homeless by circumstance, who happens to have an RV, and the city is allowing them to park in public parking spots with the understanding that they are seeking to get a more permanent location to live. So that's one example. Another example, and this is more of an approach, this is an approach called crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED. If there's actually a document out there about CPTED in parking facilities. Ryan, did you want to jump in on this one?
Oh, no, CPTED was part of our educational background. It goes back to the 1970s, and some people argue it goes back to some writings in the 1960s about design of community. And funny enough, that one of the principal scholars and progenitors, Oscar Newman, was not a criminologist or a law enforcement or government official of any type, but an architect.
And it's funny because you look this, and what you just said is important in this way to me, in that it just can't, it reinforces the point about doing things as a community, is that we just can't be coming up with crime prevention strategies specific to a location without bringing in people and bringing in experts or people who have knowledge to try and mitigate what those things are. And it's funny because even with my institute here, yes, we're critical infrastructure focused. The majority of us are former government retired, a couple of private industry retired, but the perspectives we bring in sometimes are limited because of what our history is. And one of our challenges is to get the word out about our various courses, professional development courses as we offer. And so everyone's got an opinion about how to do marketing. None of us have a marketing background. So you have to be willing to bring those experts in. And so what's cool is this gentleman who was an architect starts this whole movement called ZepTed, and the guy wasn't even a cop. And I said, that'd be too bad we can't like interview and say, so what motivated you for this? And I wonder if he would say, it's bottom line, man, we got to keep things safe. Okay, so the last thing is that I have is specific to policies and procedures. And oh, before I end, there is another, I had all these keyed up. There is an association for ZepTed. So if you're interested in getting more information about this, I don't know where this is. I don't know what's, oh, I think that's international actually. Nah, I looked at that. We're not going. Sorry, Ryan, I don't have the money. And then finally, the importance of policies and procedures. And this, I pulled this one up. I actually made the mistake of, oh, well, it's even better. Policies and procedures. So this is over at the School of Osteopathic Medicine. The facility is down in the Woodlands area. But again, writing up these things, making sure people are aware of them, not just printing them and putting them in a binder. Again, all of these things work. Whoops. Oh no. I don't know what just happened. We can fix that. All right. So all of these things, looking at mitigating risk, and it's almost like the best defense here is not beginning with how are we going to reduce crime, but rather take away the opportunities. And I apologize, you could steer the guy mowing the grass outside. Noise canceling technology. What do they think of next? Think of this from the perspective of how do I reduce risk of people becoming victims of criminal activity rather than how do I prevent the criminal activity? Because at the end of the day, and this will be my final comment, and then I'll see if anyone has any thoughts or questions. At the end of the day, what I want to happen, which we can never measure, is that when the person is driving to decide if they're going to do car burglaries, and then they see the security person driving around in a cart, or they see cameras, or they see it's not easily accessible, that you have to go through an arm bar and take a ticket, and there's a camera taking a picture of your plate, that they don't enter at all. But we don't know what there's no way to really know that, because we can't obviously get in the minds of people. So with that, that's sort of the gist of what I have. I'm here and ready to answer any questions or thoughts or comments.
If nobody has anything, and I hope they do, I'm going to switch back over to my last few things on that kind of capstone what you were saying about closing the opportunity loophole. Well, check the chat one more time. Nope, still stuff about Stinky Greeley. Got it. All right. So, situational crime prevention, which I mentioned previously, it is a very functional mechanism for addressing problems specifically with public-private partnerships to close those opportunity loopholes. If you remember back to the slide where opportunity is a convergence of three particular elements, and just because there's opportunity doesn't necessarily mean crime will occur. There's opportunity because things can be crime generators, crime attractors, so on and so forth. And in the case of Oscar Newman, and there are countless others, people who are not necessarily criminologists by trade, but look at a problem from a different point of view and illustrate mechanisms for eliminating opportunity or reducing risk for citizens, or whatever the case is. There are 5 fundamental overarching things here, and I'm not going to get into this. Is why I kind of put the badge over the top of it. It's not necessarily important to get into the individual elements of how to apply these things, but we're talking about increasing the effort. And I think Mark mentioned this earlier. I don't know if he was specifically referring situational crime prevention, or that's just years of experience. But increasing the effort, people talk about hardening targets all the time, but that's not the only particular way to do it. Increase the risk which you'll be caught, reduce the reward of engaging in a particular activity, reduce provocations, as Mike mentioned, the person who most often then gets into an assault situation, and remove excuses. One of my favorite things, as I'm a old school regulation compliance person, is to remove excuses, assist compliance, reinforce the rules, post instructions. That's my wheelhouse. Those are the things I like to do. But if you're looking for information on these, they're housed. You can Google 25 techniques of situational crime prevention, but also all the case studies I referred to previously would be found at popcenter.org. It's now housed at Arizona State. It's been previously housed at different institutions. But POP Center stands for Problem Oriented Policing Center. But I would suggest that problem oriented policing is mostly about problem identification and community partnerships. So that's my 2 cents on it, and that's about it. I mean, that is a tough stop, but that is the stop. I have no process out of this. So, any questions, or would somebody like to save me from myself at this point?
I'll save you. Crystal, over to you in the studio.
Thank y'all. Thank you both so much. I have received a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you, if that's okay. So one of the questions I received: with the advancement of technology, do you think there's more that can be done to reduce the risk of crimes occurring in parking lots, maybe with the help of AI or other like technological tools?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll speak to 2 different things, and Mike can jump in because he's certainly aware of some of these things as well. I've previously had the opportunity to lecture at the National Police College in China. And in that experience in China, they took us on various field trips, including those that were surrounding community surveillance. And the community surveillance mechanisms that they had were primarily algorithm based at the time instead of AI based, but they could track from like building top unnatural convergences, unnatural disperses, slip and falls, violent aggressive movements, and it would flag that video to a control center that would have I guess their equivalent of a not licensed but person who worked for the police department, an analyst, flag it for response. So in that respect, you have a tendency towards like a complete control mechanism where you have eyes on everything, and that brings up privacy questions and other questions of citizens' rights. But here in America, I've worked with somebody who developed algorithms for detecting unnatural walking patterns in parking lots to determine essentially whether or not something should be flagged to a control center too for follow-up, whether or not somebody's like prowling vehicles or pacing about, loitering, so on and so forth. And these algorithms, they're out of being developed UNC Charlotte, I want to say, possibly UNC Wilmington. I cannot remember the institution, but people are working on engaging technology. But the thing is, if you pursue technology and AI too far, you're intruding on spaces that are protected by the Constitution, and I think that becomes the trade-off, like personal rights and your rights that protect you from powers of government versus empowering the government to pursue and limit criminal activity. You don't want an authoritarian nation, but you also don't want a complete deregulated, chaotic structure, right? Somewhere between Thunderdome and, the world of dystopian future novels.
Thank you. Mike, did you have anything to add for that question?
Yes, I was feverishly writing because unfortunately or fortunately, Ryan has touched on issues like he mentioned community surveillance. I was going to bring up the First Amendment issue. You took that out from under me, Ryan. Thank you. But then we talked about, and then I was writing to myself, where is the tipping point between how much of our freedom or a movement that's not tracked are we willing to give up? At what point? Like, I refuse to put a Ring doorbell on my door. I refuse to buy any remote controlled appliance, a refrigerator, anything. That's to me, it's pushing that end. And then do we, if with the continuing additional technology, do we actually over rely on those things? And I think that at the end of the day, regardless of the technology, the fact is that all of these things are not going to stop the criminal activity from happening. They're either going to allow law enforcement to do a criminal investigation with more information. And so to what extent do we want to do that? And then there's one thing that Ryan didn't bring up, which is what's the difference between giving up our rights on government community surveillance versus private industry community surveillance. So in the case of a parking lot, you're going in, I'm certain there will be signs, well, this area is under video surveillance, got those signs. So you're in a way passively consenting to having all your information. And let's even talk about the web for a minute. If you go to Google, it's going to track your history. If you go into Amazon, it's tracking your social media, all of that. But then even how many of you guys take those cards to get points for Walmart or anywhere else for that matter, or credit card? You're consenting to all of your behaviors, habits, and patterns being. So maybe I'm talking myself out of the idea of that we're giving up our First Amendment right. We've already given it up to private industry. We give it up to government, depending on if you have a driver's license, you're giving up information. You're giving up your right to freedom of movement while driving under the influence. So that's not a clean answer to the question. There's always new technology. There's always a new way to do things. We have to look at it from the cost benefit analysis. How much does it cost? Who has the power and what's in it for me? Are the three questions that I always bring up with these types of things. For the person who asked the question, did we touch on what, if you don't mind throwing up in the chat, did we touch on, give you the information you needed? Let us know. Go ahead, Crystal.
Thank you for that. I had another question. So I believe you both mentioned this idea of, perception is everything. And so in your opinion, do you think there's anything that can be done to reduce this fear of crime, in parking lots?
Well, again, I think that goes to what type of parking lot is it? Is it a grocery store? Is it a nightlife parking lot? Is it a area that is a high crime area where there's a parking lot? I mean, at the end of the day, people are going to live their lives. I think that when something significant happens that shocks the conscience, there's a short-term impact on fear. But after a while, that goes away. You can just throw out the big one, COVID. Are we even close to the fear that we had in 20? The answer is no. When 9/11 happened, there was fear of further terrorist attacks. Does anybody how long did that carry on? And at the end of the day, what I think when it comes to fear is, sadly, if it's not personal, you're not going to fear it. So if you haven't been the victim of a criminal act, it's like, whatever, that's somebody else. Ryan?
No, I agree with that. Like it's tough to change your behavior and adapt until you have something to adapt to. And that's something that I do in my own studies, is figuring out what thresholds of experiences do people need to adapt behavior. But behavioral adaptation doesn't just it isn't just about response to previous victimization. It can be a response to various victimization or fear that's caused in the media. It can be a response to anything. Like, I stub my toe on a floor outlet, so I close the latch every single time I'm done with it because I don't want to hurt my toe again. Behavioral adaptation ranges, but is important to understanding how people navigate spaces and navigate situations, and how we can reach them to improve their risk mitigation, risk reduction, and close those opportunity loopholes. But keep in mind, from this perspective, this assumes a semi-constant thread of motivated offenders in the world. And that is essentially ignoring a large space of theory and a large space of activity in our research world. It's just saying it's going to be there. And the only thing we can do, or one of the things we can do, is close the opportunity gaps to protect ourselves. So it is a particularly conservative approach to criminological theory.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you. So you've talked about opportunity and location. I know there's like this convergence of both, but in your opinion, which do you think matters most?
Opportunity, because the location is nothing without opportunity. Like you said, you don't find too many carjackings in a cow pasture.
That's fair.
Same, I'm good.
I believe I
Maybe a
have another
tractor driving.
question. So let's see. The person says, I recall that there are mixed findings about how controlling crimes in a hotspot would not make crime just disappear, but make it happen somewhere else. What's
Yeah.
your opinion on this?
Well, displacement and diffusion have been hot areas of study in sort of this area of research since the 90s. There have been a few good studies on capturing displacement. Diffusion, on the other hand, is like a diffusion of benefits, like a crime control process or policy or activity that then has wider spread benefits because the presumption that the same activity is occurring elsewhere is diffusion of benefits. But a displacement is the concern that was brought up originally by Sherman and then later echoed by a scholar named Repetto in the 70s, that if you cut off crime opportunities in one particular place, criminals would simply move to the next most available place, and you would only be pushing it around in an uncontrolled way, which the argument was at the time, like, if we can contain criminal activity, use the dimmer switch and turn it down and modify it, be able to control what's happening in a particular area, isn't it better for us to leave it there? Well, over the time since then, the numerous studies have kind of demonstrated that crime doesn't simply just remove or move around the corner. In fact, there's a good article called "Does Crime Just Move Around the Corner?" by John Eck and Larry Sherman, and it shows that by and large it doesn't. And when we get into why, Mike can have comment on this. We find out that criminals who have sort of habitual or career type crime activities, not circumstantial, but that's their business, have a sort of a set routine, a set area of operation, and it can be kind of lazy when it comes to changing tactics and changing location. And I'll leave you with an anecdotal story on this. When I was a student in Cincinnati, I worked with John Eck, and one of the bigger problems for Cincinnati PD's eyes was a drug market that was under the Big Mac Bridge on the Ohio side. If you don't know, Cincinnati is on the Ohio River, and on the other side is Kentucky, and you have a batch of small cities, essentially suburbs of the downtown Cincinnati area. So you'd have people come across from the Kentucky side, take the exit, turn left under the Big Mac. It was called like the McIntyre Bridge or something. We called it Big Mac Bridge. They would buy drugs, hang another left, take the on-ramp, and be back in Kentucky. So it created an interstate problem. It created like a jurisdictional issue. It created prosecution issues. It created all sorts of technical difficulties in the criminal justice system. And so they approached Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati, who had a very good partnership with Cincinnati PD, and to sort of workshop the problem. And at the time, my mentor and boss was like, well, why don't you just close the street under the bridge? They're like, oh, we can't do that. We can't dedicate this, that, and whatever to a street closure. You say, well, you do it all the time when you have races. Put a concrete barrier there. So for half a day, they moved a concrete barrier in and put a couple of signs up that said road closed. They left it that way for a month. Zero drug activity because people couldn't take that turn. You'd say, did it displace elsewhere? We measured as far away as we could within the downtown area and the near proximities. Drug activity didn't move. The fact that we closed down the spot that they knew, and they knew how to do the sort of the deal, as it were, essentially disrupted the entire market for months. Now, whether it came back later on, we don't know. And that's another issue in the study of displacement and diffusion, is how long does the absence of displacement last? How long can a treatment effect last? But think about it just like anything else where you're delivering a treatment. How long does the treatment last? Can you cure problems, or do you just treat it for a certain amount of time? And what we know right now is some of the longest studies are 6 months a year, and we can show that there's minimal displacement and some diffusion of benefits in those periods of time. But is it a permanent fix? Now you're getting into the issue of like, are there more community and social issues that need remedy relative to a particular place? And the one place I'm talking about wasn't community. It was literally an underpass. You know, it was not like a bad neighborhood. It was concrete next to a river.
Crystal, can you ask the question again, please?
Yes, the question was, I recall that there are mixed findings about how controlling crimes in a hotspot would not make crime just disappear, but make it happen somewhere else. And what's your opinion on this? And then they have a follow-up as well, if you don't mind. They said, do you think the drug offenders desisted after the closure of the street?
Do I think the offenders went away? And that's a good question. And I think from the perspective of Cincinnati PD and Cincinnati government, as long as they weren't buying drugs in Cincinnati, they probably didn't care. That's not necessarily their what they're like any entity, as long as it's not happening at my place. So I don't know. I would suspect that the drug offenders didn't give up their search, but the drug purveyors were limited in their capacity to sell.
Okay, so my response is that displacement is a valid tactic to minimizing criminal activity, and crooks are going to be crooks. It doesn't matter. The percentage of people who are out to take advantage of the public, it goes back to the hardcore homeless example from earlier. It doesn't matter. They're going to continue to offend, and every time you close an avenue, they're going to go somewhere else. All of those drug dealers, all of those drug users in the example that Ryan gave went somewhere else. So potentially I'm going to guess that they dispersed, but eventually it's going to start up somewhere else. So if you're going to invest heavily or you're going to focus on displacement tactics, it just can't be a one-off. It has to be sustained, and it has to be over time to make that happen. Now, this is, you brought up leaving criminal activity where it is, and it'll take care of itself, or it's better to contain it. So this is Kensington, Philadelphia, or a neighborhood called Kensington. And I was scrambling to find the article, a particular article, but instead it was easier just to put the photos up here. And I guess the best part is that I think there's a couple of parking lots in the pictures, but at the end of the day, this was a project that I was involved in when I worked for the Naval Postgraduate School. We're addressing something called situational social network analysis to map out networks of individuals engaged in criminal activity. Specifically, in this case, it was the drug trade. Kensington was known for heroin sales, and it had a reputation. This neighborhood had a reputation globally. People would actually come here to go to this place to get high. And at the time, I was working with a police administrator here, and the conversation was, so we specifically talked about, so now Kensington at that time, this was 2015, 2016, was not a crime problem. They knew that there was drug dealing, they knew where there were people going there to get high, but at least at that point, it was a very clean, well-maintained neighborhood. And the argument was, look, I know what's going on there. I can go in there and sweep out those folks, but I've got 3 other neighborhoods that are where there's shootings going on 2 or 3 a week, trying to control the drug trade in those areas. So the question is, do I leave this to be on its own, or do I go in and wipe these people out, or make the arrests and then displace the problem? So it was a little ironic for me to start seeing these stories start popping up in the media over the last year that Kensington is now a blank hole, and it's out of control. And so what is again, if you go back to risk, right? What is the risk of turning a blind eye to criminal activity that's occurring, say, in the parking lots? What's the risk? Well, it gets out of control and it gets to a point where now you have people who are being injured that previously didn't happen because you've ignored it. So again, cost benefit, risk analysis, how much are you willing to spend to mitigate it? So, but I'm a big fan of displacement. In my 26 years, to me, if you kept them moving and did not give the opportunity for criminal activity to take hold in a particular location, you were better off over the long haul.
Thank you so much for that. I think we have time for one more quick question. Just in your experience, have you seen different types of crimes in school parking lots compared to like college campuses or high schools compared to maybe like ATM parking lots or just parking garages in general?
Well, we have the advantage here at SAM, and I think the law has changed over time that requires reporting of criminal activity. So what I've seen, at least here at SAM, has been auto thefts and auto burglaries seem to be what's reported campus wide. That's the and then you'll see some sexual assault reporting go out, but I don't know that that's tied to parking lots. So I think it's consistent with anything else. So I guess the short answer is no. I think it's common there. I think it falls into that category of quasi-public spaces that the function is learning, so you're not going to see significant crime activity. Now, Michael posted a question. It's all about the money, why they have not cleaned it up. Well, I'm assuming that ties back to the Philadelphia example. And what I would say is it's all about the money to the extent that you have a finite number of resources available, finite number of police officers available. So where do you put that time? That's kind of
that was the same with the Cincinnati thing. They would on and off park their mobile unit. They call it the Vortex unit. They would on and off park the Vortex unit under that underpass to sort of break up drug dealing. But you got a limited amount of sort of like person hours and dollars to spend. And at the end of the day, if a concrete barrier movement frees up the Vortex unit to go to other parts of the city and frees up resources, then it's a much better return on investment than simply parking a unit there constantly. And yeah, it's sort of like we often think about, and I'll make this note in class, like if you drive on 45, it is the death speedway. People are casually doing 95 miles an hour. Well, speed limit 70 or 75. Why are you doing it? Because you're not afraid you're going to get caught. You're not worried about it at all. But if we had traffic cams that shot you your license plate and sent you a ticket every single time, you'd probably slow down. And that's sort of the way it is in China. Is you 1 mile over the limit, you're getting a ticket sent to the house. But we're blurring the line between your freedom to choose responsibly and the resources it would take and the infrastructure creation it would take to plop a camera every 1.5 miles, every 2 miles between let's call it the Woodlands and Huntsville. So that's the balancing act of crime control and personal freedoms that we live with in America. That doesn't necessarily exist in other countries because they have different views on crime control, government power, and personal freedom.
Okay, I want to show this. So we talked about technology, and let's see if there you go. There's some easy technology to prevent crime. We didn't even talk about putting a dummy in a police car. Oh wait, putting a mannequin in a police car.
Yeah, you got the first part covered.
Yes, but is that gonna have an impact? Is that gonna displace criminal activity? Yeah, for a time, and then it's how long do you treat it and then move on? So anyway.
Thank you both, Mike, Dr. Randa. I think we're at time now, but we can all agree that this was really informative. Thank you both so much for your time and your expertise. We really, really appreciate it. Welcome back, everyone. We want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time, so I'm going to go ahead and get started again by introducing our next speaker, Mr. Mark Lenahan. Mark has been a crime victims lawyer for over 25 years and believes that the skills he's developed representing victims of crime have proven to be powerful tools against the hidden criminality causing too many of the wrongful deaths in America, including many of the 5,000 fatalities caused by 18-wheelers every year. Mark is also licensed to practice law in New York, North Dakota, and in a special court in Washington, D.C., where he can litigate against terrorists and foreign governments. In 2014, after the mass murder at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, Mark was asked to become the chairman of the board for the National Compassion Fund, which was created at the request of families surviving mass murders at Sandy Hook, Columbine, and 9/11 in hopes of stopping the misdirection of donated funds. Since its creation, the National Compassion Fund has ensured that every single penny of the more than 150 million that has been entrusted to it has been delivered only to the survivors of the mass casualty event that the donors intended. It's been repeatedly endorsed by the FBI and overseen the distribution of donations for various mass casualty incidents. We're grateful to have Mark here with us today. And with the last presentation, if you have any questions for Mr. Lenahan, feel free to enter them in the chat and we'll do our best to go through them during our Q&A session. Mark, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
All right, first disclaimer, crime victims lawyers have learned to see things that are easy to overlook. And I'm going to try to teach you some of those things. In doing so, there's a real chance I'm going to ruin the way you see a parking lot. I don't want you to live in fear, but I do want you to be able to see what's what in a parking lot in a more aware way. And since many of y'all are on or are going to be on the front lines of making the world better, I want to share with you the reasons hidden behind some of these crimes so that you can look for the solutions for us. This wonderful old song, remade a million times now, certainly contrasts parking lots as being the opposite of paradise. And you'll see that I agree with that. Our process as we go through this is going to be simple enough. I'm going to step you through a variety of parking lot crimes, and we'll talk about each for a few minutes. When I say we're going to talk about parking lot crimes, I don't mean we're going to talk about folks who park as badly as this guy, or even as bad as this person, or even this fella who I actually kind of have a little bit of respect for their creativity. We're going to talk about violent crimes. So how serious is the problem? As the doctor and the director were telling us, it's real. Parking lot crimes, we are most likely to become a victim of a crime in our home. The next most likely place, number 2, is when we're in a parking lot. That is where 4% of all assaults happen. And the FBI tells us that, at least back in 2017, just in parking garages, not lots, garages, there was a homicide every single day somewhere. So as we step through a variety of these crimes, let's talk about what happens, why it happens, and if I have any ideas on how you can keep yourself safer, I'll share those too. But I know that my ideas are going to be limited. Y'all are often going to be more professional and informed than I am on these things. So I really want y'all to use your chat function to share those ideas as we go. This is not a long presentation and I speak way too quickly. So absolutely ask any questions and share any tips. And Krista will hop on anytime she likes. And if you do that, we'll all be really grateful. So crime category number 1, the fender bender. So imagine that you're pulling into a convenience store parking lot and somebody nicks the rear bumper a little bit as you're parking. Not a big deal. Normally people just get out thinking they're going to swap insurance info and then get back on to why they were at the store in the first place. But what is really happening? Hopefully it was just an accident. Convenience store lots are chaotic, especially if they got the gas pumped right behind you. If so, the other driver will apologize for not seeing you. You swap insurance and there's no harm done. Or maybe it wasn't so innocent. Maybe it is the beginning of a shakedown and the driver is going to try to Jedi mind trick you into, oh, give me $500 out of the ATM and we'll just forget about it. But this webinar is about violent crime. So we're going to look at the third option seriously, that you're being set up. And at the moment you open the door, the other driver is going to pistol whip you on the head and take your wallet or steal your car or both. If it is this third one, we're in real trouble. Unlike in the movies, in real life, when somebody gets pistol whipped to the head, they don't just pass out, they suffer brain injuries. And an attempt to fight back can quickly escalate into a homicide. Remember, the other guy is a criminal and his gun is already out. But the worst scenario, the worst, in my opinion, is that while you're laying on the ground, you see your car being driven away knowing that a loved one is still inside. And I've represented people in each of these three situations. In the abduction instance, a young mother was being driven away on a dark highway. She decided, knowing that it would kill her, that it was better for her to jump from the speeding car. She decided that it would be easier on her family if her body was found quickly than if she went missing for days or weeks or months. So she jumped, thinking that was the last thing she would do. But by some miracle, she landed in this mushy bog and none of her physical injuries were permanent. So that's what happens in the fake fender bender. But why does it happen? The perpetrator looked around and chose this convenience store because there weren't any cameras, no other customers outside, and because even though there might have been several customers on the other side of the glass window, they'd never see a thing. Bad stores obstruct the view with advertisements. Even worse ones block the windows entirely with shelves or products. This is exactly the kind of scenario that crime victim lawyers sue stores for. Those lawsuits sometimes secure real financial recoveries for victims and their families. But you can't correct the kind of harm we're talking about with money. What can be more satisfying is when we can force a place like this to shut down or be sold to better management. But how do you protect yourself? This is where I really want y'all to hit the chat button below and share some ideas as they come to you. Though I use convenience stores for this example, a fake fender bender setup could happen in a zillion other places too. And you're not going to be sure if it's just an accident or something else when it happens. So yes, calling 911 is a perfectly acceptable idea. And they will not mind if you say, I'm at the Quickie Mart, and though this isn't an emergency yet, I got rear-ended and something feels wrong. Remember, it was like the director was telling you, something felt wrong when he approached that fellow in the parking lot. Something feels wrong. Nobody's going to mind if you call 911 and just let them know that. Say, I'm afraid it might be the first step to a robbery or an assault. And absolutely put that call on speakerphone and at full volume. Yes, you're doing it so that 911 can listen in if anything happens, but it is really so that the potential assaulter knows that 911 is listening in. Even so, the other driver will be at your door in 20 seconds and the cops won't be. What I tell myself is, dude, if this ever happens to you, speakerphone 911, describe to 911 the other car or the other person, and to set off my own alarm. What I mean by that is most key fobs now have an alarm button on there. Set it off. Pretend to do it by mistake. They won't know that it's not from the collision. And be very clumsy about trying how to figure out how to turn it off. Let it honk a good 10 times before you cancel it because you're just discombobulated. The perpetrator chose a place where they thought there wouldn't be any witnesses. Setting off your own alarm might make them second guess themselves. But if you're intrigued by that idea, after this webinar, go out to your car and practice setting off your own alarm. It will be hard to do if you're nervous and you haven't practiced. All right, I know lots of y'all are saying, dude, if I see a convenience store looking like that, I'm just going to keep on driving. I love it. That's great. In addition to posters covering the windows of places like that, let's talk about other specific signs you can look for that give you some idea about how much the landlord cares about the safety of the property. Let's start with one you have seen hundreds of times without ever realizing it has any significance in the world. Those things that are sometimes at the end of a parking space are called parking spots, parking stops. And just like in the photo, they're supposed to be centered in the spot. The reason they need to be centered is so that when you have your arms full of stuff or you're running to your car in the rain, you won't trip on them when you're squeezing between cars. That makes sense. But some property owners try to squeeze in more spots than they originally had without getting the professional help of moving the concrete blocks back to a new correct spot or getting professional advice. The result is that they change where the lines are painted, but they don't move the spots. So when the parking stops block the path between cars, people trip on them. Now, I'm not telling you this because the tripping has any relevance to what we're talking about. Although I would love it if you guys, saved you from a trip. I'm telling you this because it is indicative of something to look for. Once you train your eyes to see how bad landlords do this, you'll know that the landlord doesn't care enough about safety to get professional help on how to do things right. Keep on driving. 2 way more obvious signs that you're in a parking lot you should avoid. First, there's no reason ever anymore for a parking lot to have dark spots. That was a problem decades ago. Current lighting technology just makes it completely inexcusable. Second, broken stuff. Like the parking spots, seeing this just increases the odds that you're someplace where the landlord doesn't pay for preventative maintenance. If they're not paying for that, you can be sure that spending money for your safety is way lower on their priorities. New theme, hotels. That's easy to talk about. What happens is robberies with the threat of force, and too often it happens right after you've parked. This happens because the perpetrator assumes you have travel money and valuables with you. The perpetrator also thinks that you're probably tired and probably in a place where you've never been before. If so, you're disoriented, and that makes you an easier target. And from a prosecution standpoint, and Max can probably talk about this, out-of-town victims are way less likely to even report the crime and way less likely to show up for a criminal trial. So the perpetrator's thinking, I get to walk free. Remember, these tips are just my own thinking, so please share your ideas through the chat. All right, first, lots of the same ideas with the fake fender benders. But unlike convenience stores where you can just keep driving if the lighting is terrible, lots of times we've already paid for our hotel room weeks earlier, or it is the only hotel in town that fits the budget the boss placed on the trip. So unlike the convenience store where we have the option of just driving on to the next one, you're probably gonna stay at the hotel even if this webinar has freaked you out. The obvious no-cost safety tip is to park where the lighting is good and the visibility is good if you can. That means right in front of the main door. Yes, you will get more door dings putting your car at the busy part of the parking lot, but you are way, way, way safer. Now, 2 other options come to mind, but unfortunately, they can add tons of cost to your trip. Fancier hotels or hotels with controlled access garages are going to be safer. And if the hotel has a valet option, that takes time and money, I know, but it is an awfully safe way to get in and out of your own car is if you got a valet right there next to you the whole time. Mike mentioned that jugging is a thing, or at least probably has always been a thing, but at least now it's in the the community psyche. And like I said, it's always been out there. So let's talk about some things that are metaphorically equivalent of the jugging. You'll remember that the director explained that jugging is the crime where the perpetrators watch you withdraw money from the ATM and then follow you to your next stop because they know you have cash. But another move we've seen is for folks inside a casino to watch who leaves the cashier's window with a big pile of cash, follow them to the parking lot and attack them there, or on their route home, or at some stop along the way. It's really the same thing as jugging. It just replaces another asset for the ATM. But there are other easily spotted things that are just about as good as cash. If a criminal spots me walking to my car with a large Louis Vuitton shopping bag, they don't really need to know what's in the bag. It's a pretty good clue that whatever it is, it's going to be worth a couple $1,000s, which is a whole lot more than most folks ever withdraw from any ATMs. All right. One of the points in the title was collisions, and we're going to talk about collisions. Let's do this one a bit differently, though. Let me just show you what our reconstruction of what happened in one of my firm's cases against a very fancy shopping mall. I'll tell you that the driver didn't know the victims and that the victims were visiting from overseas. I'm going to play a video and then just start throwing your ideas on the why into the chat. And I'm going to confess in advance, I didn't realize until I was well into the case that there are lots of reasons that this kind of collision happens in parking lots and garages of fancy malls and similar places. So your why is probably going to be one of the correct whys. Let's hit me with them. All right, so what is happening? Two best friends are exiting a skywalk from our very fancy mall when a driver hits them at a zillion miles an hour. And the police report didn't explain why. So start hitting me with reasons about why you think maybe this happened. And while you're doing that, I'm gonna give you some clues as to one of the reasons it happens while you keep loading us up on your ideas. And let me show you two photos of the rooftop of that same garage. There's one shot and a second photo. So after scouring aerial imagery going back a decade, we understood one of the reasons this happens. There have always been donut skids on this roof. Our theory is that drivers start at the bottom and race to the top, where they do their joyous celebration of their fast and furious moment. Another thing we found when we dug into the history of this exact same mall, and I mentioned this earlier when the doctor and the director were talking, is at this mall, there are days often when 3 cars a day are stolen. Those of y'all on this webinar already know this, but I'll say it anyways. Car theft is organized crime, and it is big business, and they do not care who they hurt, and they do not care what it takes for them to avoid getting caught. They do not want to get caught. They will hit the gas to get out of there if they think they've been spotted. One related idea to that is the one we've already talked about. Fancy malls are good places to shoplift from and good places to rob from customers. And when that doesn't go as planned, they drive as fast as they can to get away. Another angle, a really simple truth is your server at the local wings place is afraid that if they cut you off from drinking too much, they won't get a good tip from you. But the server at a fancy restaurant at a fancy property is afraid that if they don't sell you your 4th bottle of $300 bottle of wine, they're not worried about the tip. They're worried about losing their job because that restaurant wants to sell you every $300 bottle of wine you can get. Now, here's where I think I'm going to surprise you on how to spot the safer garage. So again, I'm gonna show you two photos. I'm gonna ask you which one you think is safer for avoiding collisions. We'll call this one the yellow lot because it has yellow stripes. And this one we'll call the white one because it has white stripes. And which one is safer for avoiding collisions? Again, another look at the yellow one. And another look at the white one. And the safest one is the yellow one, and it's not even close. The very things that make this garage less aesthetically appealing are why it is so much safer. It has all these weird angles and ramps with sharp edges and narrow walls. It feels confined because it is confined. Drivers do not have a choice about going slowly here. Physics forces them to go slowly here. Contrast that with the white one, and you can see that there is nothing stopping a driver from going as fast as they want. It is totally wide open. Race car drivers have a rule that they live by. Radius equals speed. You force a car to go slower by making it tougher for it to turn. In places like the white lot, it's just a blank canvas. It's huge. You can go as fast as your car's tires can take it. Now, new theme with a little legal education background for you on this one. In many states, crime victims lawyers have to start with the exact same question that dog bite lawyers have to start with. Did this happen before? Did this dog ever bite anybody before? Or was there ever a robbery at this convenience store before? So, when a client was murdered at an adult bookstore, I wondered what crimes had occurred at the adult bookstore before. And when I parked my car there and got out, it was unlike any parking lot I'd ever seen. Every inch of pavement was covered in shattered glass from broken car windows. It looked like hundreds of cars had been broken into. So I'm thinking, when I ask for the pile of police reports at this property, it's going to be, a mile high. I got none. When I asked for the reports, there were no police reports for that property. So when we ask the question, why this time, let's ask it in two different contexts. Why was there so much crime? At least that's what it looked like to me at the place. And why were there no police reports if there were a bunch of crimes at that place? Again, let's start hitting me with theories if you like. And I am going to walk through you as you do that. Imagine that
Who wants to be affiliated with the dirty bookstore?
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's exactly where we're going. Imagine that you're a customer, like Mike seemed to have an immediate knowledge of an adult bookstore. You go inside and buy a magazine and return 10 minutes later to find that your car window is shattered and your radio is gone. Do you call the police and your insurance company? Turns out the answer is not right away, because you don't want anybody to knowing that you bought an adult magazine. You throw the magazine in the trash, then you drive to a nearby IHOP, eat some pancakes, and then you call your insurance company, telling them that somebody stole your radio while you were eating. The consequence of this is that if a perpetrator wants to commit a crime in the parking lot of an adult bookstore, their victim is going to help them get away with it. And I'm guaranteed that the director and the doctor can have some opinions on the importance of underreported crimes. So feel free to kick in any ways you want. But let's go to a more extreme issue here. I know that when I mentioned adult bookstore, some of y'all were thinking, do those places still exist? And why would anybody go to one now when free porn is all over the internet? Yeah, they do still exist. But lots of them are not really adult bookstores. They're now fronts for video viewing booths. And those are fronts for prostitution. If customers don't want to let their insurance company know that they bought an adult magazine, then there's no way they can tell anybody about going to a place where there's prostitutes. For that same reason, they're paying for everything in cash, makes them a good target. So there's no records. And cash and customers who do not want to be witnesses and who do not want cameras anywhere around are easy prey. By the way, the bookstore in that instance I'm telling you about had half a dozen cameras throughout the store. Not one of them was a real camera. They were all dummies because they're only to make it appear like they're keeping a record, knowing that the customers didn't want to keep a record. Only video camera that actually worked was the one pointing at the cash register to look for employees who were stealing from the till. So what's my safety advice on this one? As the odds increase that some customers at a business won't report a crime, the risk of crime will increase too. Now, I used adult bookstore / front for prostitution as my example, but the same rule can apply to lots of innocent places, just so long as the customers don't want anybody to know. So that's going to be a club, if it's a community that you don't want people to know you're part of. It could be privacy-sensitive medical care, it could be mental health care, addiction help. I'm sure you guys can come up with lots of places where we want the freedom to go anonymously. Number 6, parking garages. Quick mention of how to spot a powerful safety feature in garages. Remember the statistic that there's a homicide in a garage somewhere every single day. It is really easy to find parking garages with poor lighting, poor security, poor cameras, and they're located in dense city areas where homeless seek shelter from the elements. Of course, most of our homeless population wouldn't harm a fly, but some folks are homeless because they are addicts, because they're criminals and have criminal records, can't get a job, or because they have dangerous mental health problems. In addition to all that, parking garages naturally shield the view of witnesses, and they can also shield the sound of cries for help. If so, that can make them very dangerous. So what is a favorite safety feature to look for? Well, this one right here has it. Stairwells and elevators that are made of glass. This really has been the safety standard, I think, for environmental design that the professor will tell us for decades now. But they don't tear down old garages just because there's a new standard out there. There's still plenty of old ones out there. Now, the CVI named today's webinar Robberies, Collision, and Mass Murders. We talked about the robberies, we've talked about collisions. Let's conclude with mass murders. Since I first represented victims of mass murder over 2 decades ago, one that began in a parking lot, and with my position with the Compassion Fund as its chairman, I've certainly given a lot of thought to mass murders and parking lots. I actually think that parking lots are bad locations to commit mass murders because there are so many places to hide from the attacker. And honestly, because a mom in a minivan can take out a shooter in body armor. Nevertheless, parking lots are frequently involved in these mass murders. Why is that? The mass murderers you hear about on the news want to take as many lives as they can, so they're not going in with a single .22 handgun. They're going in with multiple long barrel firearms, and you can see them coming. So even if they are headed inside to attack coworkers or students or customers, they often have to start shooting in the parking lot because they start shooting as soon as they think they've been spotted. I do not have a solution for you, but I'm certain that one of the ones you hear most frequently is completely misleading. You've all heard that the way to stop a bad guy is a good guy. Excuse me. The way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Here are 2 examples of why I think that is immorally misleading. In 2017, Congressman in the House of Representatives was high enough in the House of Representatives that whenever he was in public, Capitol Police escorted him wherever he went. During a softball game, a shooter opened on the players and on the Capitol Police who were there to guard him. The Capitol Police did not need to wait for a call. They were there. They didn't need to run to their cars to get their weapons. They were carrying them. The shootout between the good guys and the bad guy took 10 minutes. It was a 10-minute long shootout, even though there was no delay from the second it started. They did kill the bad guy. They did stop the bad guy. The good guys did with their guns, but it took 10 minutes. In 2013, this is Christopher Kyle and Chad Littlefield. Y'all know Christopher as the American sniper. He and Chad were armed, exceptionally well-trained, competent beyond compare, and they were swapping texts with each other about a third fellow who they went to the shooting range with because they thought he was dangerous. Christopher texted Chad, "This dude is straight up nuts." Chad responded with, "Watch my six." And that man still killed them both. Yes, good guys with guns can stop bad guys with guns. But even the most amazing good guys with guns in the world, who are armed, who are on alert, cannot prevent the initial murders. Well, that was actually about 100 slides, and I know I talk fast, but that means hit me with any questions, discussions we can get going here. Yes, you can always reach out to my firm for anything at all. We focus on 18-wheelers and wrongful deaths and crimes all around the country. And as Crystal alluded to, we're one of the few firms that can handle terrorism cases in DC. If you ever need me, just call and ask for me personally, and we'll talk about it. Crystal, guys, anything we want to talk about here?
Thank you so much, Mark. I really enjoyed, I think we all enjoyed that engaging and informative presentation. I've received a few questions so far. Let me see. In your opinion, what are some ways that the legal system can improve to better assist individuals who may have been victimized in a parking lot?
Oh, have been victimized. Well, the difference is, honestly, it's going to be state by state a lot. Most states have, and Max could talk about this, he probably knows it by heart, the Victims' Bill of Rights. Several states have a document that has the exact same title, the Victims' Bill of Rights. It is a beautiful sounding name, and those documents read very differently depending on what state you're in. If you are in Texas, it gives you rights like they will tell me if my perpetrator is getting released from prison, for example. Great, I want to know that. But that same document in Arizona allows me to be involved way more actively in the criminal prosecution. I know that Max has seen this firsthand over and over again. District attorneys have had to tell victims over and over, "I'm sorry, ma'am, you need to understand, I represent the state of Texas. I do not represent you." It's true, but every single time a victim hears that from a district attorney, it's like being punched in the nose. Every single time. In states like Arizona, they don't say that because the victim is allowed to bring a lawyer into the courtroom and argue on behalf of the victim themselves. Ryan, what are you thinking?
I had a question about the best remedies, and I was just talking about this with somebody the other day in terms of victims leverage, victims compensation, sort of seeking not remediation, but seeking remedy in the situation. And you just touched on it. When you rely on the criminal justice system, often as a victim, you're cut out of the process and left with nothing to show for it. But hopefully, some solace in a prosecution or something that results in time away for the perpetrator. Do you think a civil process provides more comfort, remedy, repair of harm to a victim of crime than does the criminal process?
Here's some of the things the civil process does. First, the criminal process is way more powerful than anything we have. A sheriff's investigator with a badge can get information that we cannot get, and they walk into the courtroom with way more automatic respect than lawyers have. But here's what civil lawyers could do that no criminal court can do. People always talk about what caused the crime. And heck, you guys talked about this earlier. Is it the victim? Is it the perpetrator? All these things. And I want to be careful in that language choice. There isn't usually one cause. It's usually a whole combination of causes. In fact, in our cases, we see defendants always talking about the perpetrator admitted that he was the cause, and they will repeat the phrase "the cause" 100 times. But that's not the question the jury's going to be asked. They're going to be asked, was it a cause? Because there's a bunch of them. So, whereas the prosecutors will take the perpetrator and put him in jail, great. That doesn't stop. That doesn't change Dollar General's behavior in the slightest way. A lawsuit against Dollar General scares them. When I go after an apartment complexes where there's a history of rapes, they don't put the landlord in jail, they put the rapist in jail. But if I can force that property to be sold to a better management, now we can cut down on the rapes.
Yeah, we were
totally different.
100%. We were just talking about that in class the other day, where I was trying to explain the dynamics of individual versus collective and civil versus criminal engagement. And there's a middle zone where the place of business is complicit in the acts that occur. And the best way to change their behavior, I think, is something you just said, which is a pursuit of them civilly. Like criminal negligence charges against a store manager isn't going to change the way that a corporation conducts training, provides lighting, provides services. But a large lawsuit against a corporation may affect future behavior and future training. So I 100% think it simply depends, but both dynamics need to be tools of the victim. And I don't think anyone should be afraid to engage the police, but also engage a civil attorney, because criminal charges may be warranted, negligence, actual activity, so on and so forth. But on the flip side, that's not really a flip side. On the other end of the spectrum, there's possibly a complicit nature of the environment that is fostered by the corporation.
Yeah, well, get a little of this quirk of the legal system in Texas that will really, I think, provides real insight into how big a problem this is. If I am a landlord of a convenience store where, robberies happen frequently, okay? All I have to do to be completely safe, my get out of jail card from all civil lawsuits, is to tell my customers are frequently robbed in this parking lot. If I warn them that I have a problem, I cannot be sued. All I have to do is warn them of the actual problem that I'm having. Okay?
Yeah, that's just posting a sign somewhere, right?
The right sign, and I'm 100% immune from lawsuit. And nobody does it. Nobody says, we have 3 cars stolen here today. Nobody says we expect at least one person to get robbed on the way to the car once a month. That's all they got to do, but they don't want anybody to know that their place is dangerous. And so they will risk the lawsuit over complete immunity by being upfront with their customers.
Yeah, sounds like Ford Pinto.
Yeah, that's right.
But this is a fun fact from Ohio. The slip and falls lawsuits were sort of a thing. But in order to be immune from a slip and fall lawsuit during the winter, for those of you who are native Texans, that's if their ice glazes over and you slip and fall on the stairwell or on the sidewalk of an apartment complex. You could potentially take legal action against the property management company, the landlord, so on and so forth, unless there was no demonstrated effort to clear the snow. So if you were walking on fresh snow, fresh ice, so on and so forth, and you slipped and fall, they were not liable for your slip and fall because it was presumed to be too fresh for them to have gotten to it. So the unanticipated consequence of that particular loophole was that landlords would never clear the sidewalks or the stairs of snow or ice. Because if they did, then, and you slipped and fell, there was evidence that they attempted to and failed to properly make your space safe. That's a quirk of Ohio law.
I see a note on here from Professor Roberts wanting to know about the Crime Victims Compensation Fund. And I'm sure Max will talk about this if you can chime in. The Crime Victims Compensation Fund is a group, I don't know how many people it is, but they're underneath the Attorney General's office. And they are there to kick in money to victims for lost wages, some medical bills, some other things. And it has been my experience that 100% of the people I've dealt with at the Crime Victims Compensation Fund are beautiful, caring people. And I'm grateful to them every single time they can find a way to help. Their hands are tied on what they can do because their rules are statutory. But every time I've dealt with them, I've been grateful for them. Max, what do you say?
That is correct. In fact, that's one of the items I was going to touch in my presentation. But since we're in that topic, it is a fund through the Attorney General's office. And what they do is they help crime victims with any medical expenses, counseling expenses, relocation. If there is a death, for instance, a homicide case, they can assist with funeral expenses. It is an amazing program that the state has. In fact, like you were mentioning earlier, pretty much 97% of the victims that I work with, they have told me that they have gotten some kind of reimbursement. Sometimes they'll pay directly to the provider if, let's say, the victim's already attending counseling, or in other occasions, the victim will pay upfront and they'll get reimbursed for those expenses.
And big picture is they can only do things that have receipts on them, a price tag, like funeral expenses, some medical bills, some wages. There's tons of stuff they cannot do, but their heart is always in the right place.
That is correct. And one thing that I will mention, just to add to that, one thing, and there are several criteria that need to be followed, but one thing that they do not reimburse is any property loss. And that's one thing that most people are not aware, and they just assume, okay, it was a drunk driver, they hit my car, they don't have insurance, and we can't go after them. They're kind of expecting for CVC to pay those expenses on the vehicle. And unfortunately, CVC would not cover any property loss.
And they can't do anything for just, what it means to have lost a mom, for example. That's not what they can do.
Correct.
Mark, thank you so much for your presentation. That was really, really helpful. I think we're about time now, and I want to go ahead and introduce Max, our next presenter. Mr. Max Ayala, thank you so much for joining us. Max is a native Houstonian who grew up in Houston, Southwest Houston. He graduated from the University of Houston downtown with a BS in psychology in 2004. He's been a public servant for the past 20 years. He started his career at the Harris County Juvenile Probation Department as a juvenile probation officer. During his employment at HCJPD, he was assigned to pretrial, gang unit, gang court, training department, and the intensive supervision unit. After 10 years with the HCJPD, he transferred to the Harris County District Attorney's Office Victim Services. Max began as a victim assistance coordinator in 2013 and is in a leadership position as a VAC team lead. Thank you so much for being with us here, Max. Like with the last presentation, again, if you have any questions for Mr. Ayala, please feel free to enter them in the chat and we'll do our best to go through them. Max, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Crystal, for the introduction. And before I continue, I would like to thank you for being present. This is a very important and interesting topic that we're talking about. Also, I'd like to thank the previous speakers. You guys did an amazing job, had very important information to provide. And also Crystal, Dr. Bro, and anyone or everyone involved in putting this event together. Thank you for, the great job that you guys are doing. I do have some safety tips that I would like to provide you with. But before I do that, I do want to go over pretty much my role and a little bit over the division of the Victim Services Division in my office, just because a lot of people don't know that this division even exists. In fact, I'll admit it, I was one of those when I was a juvenile probation officer. I didn't know victim services was a thing until I met a prosecutor, and she pretty much told me a little bit about it, and I changed ships. And honestly, it was the best thing ever, and I have not looked back ever since. The other reason why I kind of want to bring it up is because it's amazing on how many victims, just like Mark had mentioned earlier. Of course, there's multiple reasons why a lot of victims don't report the crime, but you'll be surprised. A lot of them think that they're going to be in this process pretty much all by themselves, not knowing that there are resources available. And then the victim assistance coordinator, or we call ourselves VACs, we are there to support them throughout the process of the crime. But with that said, if anyone, I hope no one becomes a victim, but it is important to make the report, regardless if you are at a nightclub, adult store, grocery store. Do it just in order to help law enforcement locate these individuals. And two, I'm one of those that I'm not all into stats, but if you think about it, if let's say there's 10 robberies happening on a particular store and law enforcement does not know that, then they're going to assume that, okay, you know what, it's safe. So instead of having 4 patrol units, we're only going to have 1. But in reality, there should be 4 units. And again, I'm just throwing examples, but the bottom line is it is important to make the report, one, because the goal is to capture the suspects, and then 2, that way the city or even law enforcement is aware of what crimes are happening in that particular area. Well, with that said, like I said, my name is Max Ayala. I am a victim assistance coordinator at the Harris County District Attorney's Office, Victim Services. And you may be thinking, okay, what is a victim assistance coordinator? Well, a victim assistance coordinator provides support and assistance to victims of violent crimes and their immediate families. And what we mean by immediate families is because sometimes the victim may be a child, or they can also be deceased. And if it could be either a homicide or a vehicular manslaughter case. So we do have communication with the victim's family. The VAC also educates victims regarding their rights and responsibilities within the legal process, as well as any community resources that are available. I know, for instance, the homicide cases, when we do call the families for the first time, they're still trying to grieve. We do provide them with a referral list, but we do like to kind of follow up with the family because, when we do call them, they're either still planning a funeral, or they're still in shock, not realizing that, their loved one has been lost. But we do follow up with them so they know what resources are available. For instance, also with the domestic violence cases, of course, there's male and females, but for the most part, we do have female domestic violence survivors. And with them, they feel like there's no support financially, they cannot move forward. But there are a lot of nonprofit organizations out there that provide those services for them. And just to make sure, we do not provide direct services to the victims or their families, but we do make those referrals. I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on that as well. As far as our duties, of course, we have several, but these are some points that I'm bringing up just because of time purposes. But pretty much, just like what Mark had mentioned earlier, it's just to ensure that the victims are aware of their rights. Unfortunately, just like what the system calls it, criminal justice, we forget, and what I say we, I'm referring to as society. We forget about the victim and we focus more on the actual defendant. So we do provide them with the victim impact statement form. And in some cases, we do help them complete that form. And pretty much the victim impact statement, what that is the victim's right to tell the courts and the defendant how the crime has impacted them. And this can be either physically, emotionally, financially. So they can submit that to our office. They send that form. If the defendant is committed to DCJ and they go to prison, we include that VIS to the packet, and it is transferred with the defendant. If the individual or the defendant is eligible for parole, there is a victim services division at CDCJ, and they use that information to determine if the defendant may be released out on not bond, on parole, I'm sorry. And of course, they also communicate with the families and they let them know if they would like to go and give their input as to why they should not be released on parole. What else was I was going to mention something else about the victim impact statement. If the defendant pleads guilty, or if there is a guilty verdict with the jury, the victim also has the right to go to the courtroom and give a verbal victim impact statement. And just that's pretty much what it is. The one thing that we do tell the families or the victims is that they cannot ask the defendant any questions, and they cannot use any profanity in the courtroom, just because there are rules. And the last thing we want is for the bailiffs to escort the family out of the courtroom. The other thing, I know we did talk about the crime victims compensation. I'll touch on that again. But a lot of the families are not aware that these services are available. Some feel like they do need to go to counseling, but they do not go because either they don't have the funds or living paycheck to paycheck, or they just think that, you know, they're out there on their own. But it is a great fund. I don't know their exact website, but if you just go to Google, you can type in Texas Crime Victims Compensation Program, and you'll see all the information that they do have available. And we always encourage anyone to apply, although we cannot guarantee that they are going to get approved. We do encourage them to apply, just because you never know if they are going to get accepted or not. The other, and I know there's probably some questions coming in here. Yep, that is correct. They also have, I think recently, in the last 3-4 years, I think, they've had a online link where you can do it. I tell the families to do it online because that is the quickest way to apply for the program. However, you are going to have 1 or 2 victims that prefer to do it on paper. We can either do it over the phone, or they can come to the office and we'll help them, and we can do the regular mail. The other duties that we do have is making initial contact with victims. And pretty much what that means is we try to contact the victim within 24 hours of the crime when it has occurred. And I say try is because Harris County we've been just bombarded with a lot of cases. We are behind with COVID, the Harvey flooding that happened 2017. Although most people do not believe, or it's hard to believe, because you would think, oh my goodness, it's been 6 years, but it's been difficult. But we do try to call the families within 72 hours. And pretty much the purpose of making the initial call is so they are aware that charges have been filed. We also verify their contact information, including email, address, secondary contact. From time to time, victims, especially the domestic violence victims, they either can't afford to pay their cell phone bill, so they shut it down, or sometimes they lose their phones. So to make the job easier for prosecutors and investigators, we try to get that secondary contact information. Like I mentioned earlier as well, we do make appropriate community partners, referrals. Depending on the situation, we have a great partnership with a lot of agencies within Houston or our surrounding counties that we work closely to provide these great services to the families that we work with. And like we mentioned, or I mentioned earlier, was also the VIS and the CVC information. We also build a rapport with the victim. So what they do is, they have that trust issue, just in general, not necessarily because we are a criminal justice agency, but it is important for them, especially when prosecutors change. Here in Harris County, I don't know how other counties operate, but prosecutors are moved. I think recently I've seen maybe 8 months to a year. Just either they get promoted, others just get moved so they could get that wealth of knowledge in different units and different cases. But with the with the VAC, the Victim Assistance Coordinator, we stay on the case until it's actually resolved. So that is something important. I know that, for instance, our domestic violence victims, sometimes they try to recant. So with that, we try to connect them with our domestic violence division. And what they do is that they specialize on a special caseload to help victims who are going through domestic violence. We also encourage our victims to contact us if they do have any questions, or they just want to ask questions to the prosecutor. So like I mentioned earlier, we're the liaison between the prosecutor and the victim. Most of the time, the prosecutors are either in trial, or if the victim calls during the morning and the prosecutor's in docket, they can call us and we'll be able to provide them with a next court date or any case status information that we may have. In the event that we can't answer those questions, what we do is we reach out to the prosecutor either via email or we call them. I know I have actually a very good relationship with all of my 3 prosecutors in my courtroom, including my investigator, that I do text them if it's something that can't wait. So it's something that helps the victim get those questions answered. Let's see. Oh, the other thing I think I had already mentioned, as far as therapy or counseling, we do have our partners who can provide with that information as well. The point of contact, we mentioned that. Case status, we've also talked about us answering questions. Another thing that I did forget to mention is that when the prosecutor wants to when the prosecutor wants to meet with the families, we attend those meetings for numerous reasons, but the most part is, one, we built that report, and then 2, we do have that support that they're not there by themselves. From time to time, we will have additional family members that would come. I've seen, I think, as little as 2 and as much as 25, 30 family members. So when it is a large group, we're there just to kind of guide them through the process. Typically on larger groups, the family tends to support each other, especially if it's like a murder case. We also go to the courtroom with the victim if needed or when needed. Some families, they just want to come to regular court settings, just to kind of see what's going on in the courtroom. They'll call us the day before, we'll go to court, sit with them until we get the resolution. But for sure, when there's an actual hearing, for instance, a plea hearing, a bond hearing, or even a trial, we're with them. I want to say 24/7, but since we're not there 24 hours, we're there until the duration of the trial. There are some cases that do require transportation. Our investigator will coordinate the pickup. So what they'll do is they'll call the victim, either they're locally or if they're out of town. Our investigators will go to the airport or to their house, bring them to the courtroom. In most cases, the victim assistance coordinator also pretty much rides along with the investigator to pick up the victim, depending on what the situation is. In the event, since we're talking about that, in the event that the victim requires to stay at a hotel during the trial, the investigator will also transport that individual to the hotel, and then brings them back to the courthouse or the trial. And once it's over, we'll pretty much transport them back to the airport or bus line. That way they can make it to their house or their hometown. The referrals, we've touched on that. Another thing that I kind of wanted to bring up, that we're not going to go into the specifics, but we do have other divisions in our office that help crime victims. Just because, and I'm briefly bringing this up, but victim services only handles victims of violent crimes, which will be robberies, sexual assaults, homicides, you name it. But we do have a restitution center. So if there is a burglary, these individuals will do the same thing. They'll reach out to the victims and just try to collect that information, so the prosecutor knows or has an idea on what is the property laws. And then he kind of, if they do work out a deal with the defendant, and again, assuming that the judge gives restitution, the defendant will be responsible for that restitution. Earlier, I did mention the domestic violence division. They are actual social workers and caseworkers that help with protective orders, pretty much kind of do the same thing as we do as far as going to court, but they do have more direct contact, and they have more time to spend with the domestic violence survivors, just because of their caseload. It's a little bit smaller than ours, so they have more time to kind of spend and provide the adequate services. We also have, and just like what Mark had mentioned earlier, I talk fast too, so if I do need to slow down, just let me know. But finally, we do have a sex crimes unit. And what they do is that they help, and again, just a specialized caseload of victims of sexual assaults, human trafficking, and child abuse. The same thing with them. They do have social workers, and they do have a great partnership with our children's court services. And what that is a nonprofit organization that we have here in Houston, that they provide direct services to children's of either child abuse or sex crimes. Before I go into the safety tips that I wanted to provide you, I think there were a few questions, or if you guys have any questions, I can kind of stop real quick and answer those. So I think the last question, or there was a question here from that says, so does this include help for rape and abuse crimes? That is correct, yes. And I think you're probably referring to the Texas Crime Victims Compensation. So that is correct.
Max, I did receive a question. I know you said you aren't 100% sure, like how like in other counties, but are the services offered by the Harris County DA's office similar to those offered like in other counties, as far as you know?
As far as what now? I'm sorry.
Are the services offered by the Harris County DA office, are those similar to those offered like in other counties?
Yes, so I do know in Fort Bend County, they do have the same. In fact, I live in Fort Bend County, so I know that for sure, and Montgomery County as well. And I think I see someone that says I am in Fort Bend County, and yes, yes. So to answer your question, yes, ma'am. Okay. So if there's no other questions, I'll move on. And these are just some safety tips that I've witnessed on cases that I've worked on. Um, One of the things that I do tell even my own family members, my neighbors, or people who do not live or work the lifestyle that I have. I know growing up, my sisters used to tell me, Max, you need a new job. You're paranoid. I mean, you name it. I know when I worked in the gang unit, I would go to, just let's say just a random spot and I saw gang graffiti, I would just slow down, try to analyze it, see who's there. But again, I guess it's just the awareness that, as either law enforcement or criminal justice, it kind of makes you see things in a different way. Even when I go out to eat, I sit where I can look at the all the point of entries, windows. I know my wife at first, she was kind of, weird about it, but now she understands that. And by no means, I don't want anyone to leave this training or this event scared or traumatized. Like, oh my God, it's bad out there, and I'm always going to be on alert. Well, yes, always be on alert, but just don't be afraid. Live your life as happy as you can. For those of us who are on this other side, we see so much evil that, I pray for the families that I work with. Although a lot of the times I don't get a chance to meet them, but I do. One of the things that I know you may think, okay, it's common sense, but the reality is we live in a lifestyle that is just like a rat race. You got to go to school, you got to go to work. If you have kids, you're struggling with kids. I think Mark mentioned earlier that the holidays are around the corner and there's all these advertisement by law enforcement. What I tell my loved ones and my neighbors, always be alert. No matter if it's Thanksgiving or November, December, always, always, always be alert. When you do arrive to your destination, and this could be either at a garage, a parking lot, even at your own house, look at your surroundings, look at your mirrors right before you get out. I know it's easy, and I'll give an example in a few minutes, but I'll be honest, there's been times that I have let my guard down. It's like, oh my God, what did I just do? But look at your mirrors, look at your surroundings. If you see something suspicious or if you have a gut feeling, just go with that gut feeling. If you need to call the police, call the police. And look, the reality is, if a police officer said, well, it's not important or it's not a big deal, well, to you it is. So do make that call. Of course, don't do a false report if you just, you're assuming or you just want to call the police and and give them some false information, then definitely do not do that. But be aware of your surroundings, either when you're walking or even driving. It's okay to look into people's cars when you're getting out of the car. And what I mean by that is to look if someone is in that vehicle, if it's something suspicious. Now, your question may be, okay, well, what's suspicious? Well, that's a good question. If you do see someone in a vehicle with the car turned off in the middle of summer heat, then, what are they up to? And I hate to say this, but I know sometimes we start to assume, okay, it's a hoopty or it's a car that's about to break down. This individual looks like a thug. He's going to rob me. You'll be surprised. A lot of the victims that I've worked with, these defendants are driving better cars than I am. I can't speak on your behalf, but I've seen defendants drive 2023 Mercedes, BMWs, Land Rovers, that you would never think that they are actual criminals. So they try to kind of blend in. In fact, one point that I will bring up, I know many years ago when I used to work in the gang unit, I think most of you guys are aware of the MS-13 gang, but when Central America, especially El Salvador, was kind of cracking down on MS-13 gang activity, at least based on what law enforcement had informed us, was that a lot of these gang members were actually dressing up in suits when they were going to, let's say the capital, which is San Salvador. They were wearing suits, long sleeve shirts, ties. They were hiding their tattoos. So they were blending in. And when they least expected, they were getting robbed. So the way I see it, everyone is a suspect. And again, don't take it the wrong way, but just be alert. What I do recommend, just park near cameras, or if it's dark, park somewhere where it's there's lights. Also, walk with confidence, and make sure to make eye contact with people. I do understand that in some cultures you're not supposed to make eye contact. In fact, when I was growing up, my parents told me, well, if I'm talking to you, just don't look at me, which is bizarre. But what I'm trying to get to is that suspects or these crooks, they prey on opportunity, like someone mentioned earlier today. So if you can kind of look at them, have an idea on how to distinguish what they're wearing, a lot of these individuals, they'll pretty much go away just because they may think you're going to probably put a fight, or they may think, okay, they'll be able to, give the law enforcement or the police officers the information that they need to be able to track us down. So just walk with confidence. You don't have to necessarily greet them or say hello or, have a conversation with them, but at least they know that you have acknowledged them and you are aware of that. Also, have your keys on hand when walking to your vehicle. In fact, I've seen this not just at work on the professional setting, but when I've gone on the weekends, I've seen a lot of people struggling, trying to get their keys from their purse. They don't know where it is. And again, by no means I'm re-victimizing the victim, because it is not the victim's fault. This is, I know earlier we talked about that too, but it is the defendant who should be held responsible. But if we can kind of try not to fall for being a victim, I do encourage to have your keys on hand. If you do see something suspicious, or you think, you need to get someone's attention, Mark mentioned this earlier in his presentation on the fender bender, press that panic button, like he said, and I'm kind of glad he mentioned that, because I can use that too. Pretend it's like an accident, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to push that, but that catches, attention, that draws attention. Of course, if you have pepper spray or any other devices that can help you from protecting yourself, by all means do so. The other tip that I can mention or talk about is avoid being distracted. And I get it, I have kids, but I've seen a lot of single mothers, or just someone individually who's struggling with 3 kids. Then they have their cell phone here on the side, and they have their coffee, their Starbucks coffee, and the other plays. And you have no clue on what's going on. Try to avoid that. Mainly using the phone. The purse, what I do tell individuals, that if you're going to go out and you're going to put your valuables, including a purse, laptops, put them in your trunk, but do not put them as you arrive to the store, to the parking lot, because pretty much what you're doing is you're telling the suspects where you're putting your items. So if you can do that, avoid leaving your items where they're visible. in your vehicle, that will be a great help. Um, what was the other thing there was going to mention something, but yeah, definitely don't leave those items where they're visible, just because these individuals, as soon as they get that chance, they'll hop on it. And they're, I hate to say this, but they're pros. They know what they're doing. In fact, that's what they do on a daily basis. So they know how to get away. They know who to look for. Another thing that I do want to mention is that when you do exit your vehicle, take one path, and when you're coming back, take a different path, just in case you're being followed or there's someone in the vehicle waiting. Okay, you know what? Let me see if this individual, once they come back, we're gonna, just take the chance and victimize them at that point. But if you come in a different path, then you've kind of messed up their plan, if that kind of makes sense, which will kind of apply the same thing as if you're driving. If you are driving, um, you could take different routes home. I know I do that. There has been a few occasions where I just want to go home and I'm just going straight home, and I forget the advice that I give the individuals that I speak with. So those are good pointers. One thing that I will say is in the event of an attack, which I hope that this does not happen, but do not be afraid of screaming or asking for help. And earlier today, I mentioned that I was going to give an example. Something like this happened to my wife this past weekend. We went to the store and I was trying to kind of, again, you don't expect this to happen to you, but I told her, look, you go get item XYZ and I'm going to go get the other item. Once you get it, I'll meet you in aisle 5. So long story short, I was not there, but I was getting the item that I was supposed to be getting. But my wife later on comes to me and is like, hey, this is just what happened. So while she's there with my kids, this individual just kind of, I want to call it bumped into her, but according to her, it was more than a bump. So her response was immediately scream. And there were like 2 employees, luckily, that were nearby, and that the individual took off. So by the time she came to me, I tried to look for the individual, but he was already gone. So we don't know what the intentions were. I don't know if he was trying to pickpocket her, grope her. We don't know what it was, but the point I'm trying to make is that she made a scene out of it. She, you know, I don't think she screamed, but she was firm, and her tone of voice was loud enough that caught those 2 employees' attention and helped out. So the reason I bring that up is because sometimes we are afraid to make a big deal or a scene, and people are watching us. It's okay, just do it. In the event that you do have to use force, it's okay to scratch, use your fingers. And I know the other, I think it was Mr. Michael, he can kind of give tips on this, but this is what law enforcement has kind of taught us. Go after their eyes, use your thumbs, protect yourself, do anything that you would do to defend yourself. Now, of course, if you know, can avoid that, then do it. Give them your belongings. I know sometimes, you feel like, oh my God, I worked so hard for this money. I get it, but it is not worth it. I was not like that, and I'm not gonna lie. I was one of those that I was like, okay, if you're gonna take my stuff, it's gonna be on. But after the realizing or the experience that I have, my age and the profession that I have, it is not worth it. One thing that I will mention, during Harvey, we flooded and we lost everything. So I'm at a point where, like, okay, you know what? Yes, that recliner was my favorite recliner. It's very expensive, but it is what it is. We're healthy, we're alive, we're blessed. That's all that matters. So if you can just give it to them, just give it to them. I know a lot of the times when there's an assault, and again, I'm not blaming it on the victims, but a lot of the times that there is physical injury is because when the victim tries to resist or not give them the items. And again, just for the record, no one should be a victim. We work hard for our things. We work to be happy and have the things that makes us happy. But at the end, those items can be replaced. And I would hate for anyone to have not just that physical injury, but the emotionally and psychologically injuries that those are life-lasting injuries. In fact, that's one of the things that I tell a lot of people. It's like, yeah, those physical injuries, those scars, those bruises, they'll heal with time. But those emotions and those feelings, they're not. Another tip that I can kind of give, and again, I know this may be kind of to the extreme, but you just never know. Have a flashlight in the trunk of your vehicle and have a few screwdrivers. We did have a victim that she was kidnapped, and I think this was like 3 months ago. In fact, my investigator and I were talking about this particular incident on Monday. What's the day? Yes, on Monday, because I even told him about the presentation that we were doing today. But luckily, her ability to stay calm, her ability to focus and think was that she was able to escape. Somehow, these defendants, and I don't know if you guys know, but if you don't, you can go check your trunk. But there's an emergency latch that if you're in that trunk, you can pull that latch and the trunk opens. But these individuals, they already knew what they were doing, so they removed that latch. But she was quick enough to realize that it was a newer vehicle. There was a latch, but I guess um, the little tag that says emergency latch was removed. So she was able to use her fingers to open that latch, the trunk open, and she was able to escape at a traffic light. And luckily, we were able to, or she was able to call police. And eventually, we did catch or not we, but law enforcement caught the individuals, and our office did file charges against them. The screwdriver, you may think, okay, why the screwdriver? Well, pretty much just because, it can help you either remove a tail light that's back there, or even the flashlight to get someone's attention. So those are some of the tips that I have. I know there's more, but these are just the ones that I've witnessed on the cases that I've worked with. I know that there are some law enforcement agencies that can kind of go more into the specifics on self-defense. I would highly encourage you guys to kind of look into those programs and seeing what's available. But mainly, just stay vigilant, never let your guard down, and just avoid of being a victim in these individuals. I see a question that says, does this work on SUVs? I'm not too 100% sure. I know, for instance, we drive, or my wife drives a Suburban, and I have not seen one of those latches. So I think it all depends on the vehicle that you're driving. But if you can escape, in a safely way, then definitely, just make a wise decision, pretty much. I know I'm pretty much ahead of time. I think if I'm mistaken, maybe by 10 minutes. Are there any questions or any other speakers want to add anything on the information that I provided?
My question for you, Max. Thank you so much for all of your tips and everything that you said. It was really helpful. One of the questions that I received was, how can we encourage crime victims to seek out resources and raise awareness of the types of services like that the victims assistance coordinators can provide?
So that is a great question. I think, at least in my opinion, my wife, she's an educator, and one of the things that I have learned from her was that education is very important. And I think just going out to the community, if you are, let's say, doing an event, talking about crime victims, information or referrals, just kind of spreading that word that it is available. As a matter of fact, police agencies also have victim liaisons. I know the Sheriff's Department here in Harris County, we have, I think they have like 7 coordinators. In our Houston Police Department, they also have victim advocates as well. And I'm seeing that there's also some chat information here going on social media. That is correct. You know, of course, I'm pretty much older than a lot of the students here, but social media is a very useful tool these days. I know it can be bad, but for the most part, it can be very useful. Any other questions, Crystal?
I received one more question. In your experience, how often have you personally worked with victims of robberies, collisions, or murder in parking lots specifically?
As far as robberies, a lot. I really cannot give you an exact number, but I will say that it's probably in the hundreds since I've been employed at the DA's office. Murders are very, I'm not saying that they're not happening, but they are, it does happen quite frequently. And in parking garages, it does happen quite often.